The heat here wasn't just a temperature, it was a physical weight. Heavy and suffocating, pressing down on the Sonoran desert like the punishing hand of an angry god. It stripped the moisture from your tongue and wrung the hope from the soul of anyone foolish enough to trespass on this dead land. The 2 o'clock sun hung directly overhead like a bleached, unblinking eye, scrutinizing every living thing, waiting for them to falter so it could turn them into dust. Rebecca Miller lay flat on her stomach, her cheek pressed against the coarse, sun-baked gravel that felt as hot as live coals. The smell of sagebrush and the dry decay of small animals filled her nose, the scent of eternal withering. Beside her, curled into a ball so small it made Rebecca's heart constrict with physical pain, was Emily. 8 years old, right now. Emily should have been sitting in an air-conditioned third-grade classroom in suburban San Diego, learning multiplication tables or covertly trading the contents of her lunchbox with her friends. She should have been worrying about a spelling test, not shivering in 100-degree heat, her lips cracked and pale, trying to make herself disappear under the scant shade of a thorny mesquite bush in the middle of nowhere. "Mommy?" Emily whispered. The sound scraping out of her throat sounded like dry leaves rubbing together. Raspy and weak. "Shush, baby." Not a sound, Rebecca murmured back, reaching out to squeeze her daughter's tiny hand. Her own hand was trembling, coated in yellow dust and dried blood from a scrape on her knuckles. "Remember our game? We are invisible. We are shadows. Shadows don't speak. I'm thirsty." Emily whimpered, a rare tear cutting a clean track through the thick dust on her cheek. Rebecca's heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. She reached for the plastic water bottle at her hip. It was light, too light, less than a quarter left. She unscrewed the cap and tilted it gently toward Emily's mouth. "Just a sip, Em, just a tiny sip, like a bird drinks. We have to save the rest." As Emily drank, her large blue eyes looked at her mother with absolute trust, an innocent trust that made Rebecca want to scream. Rebecca lifted her head, squinting as she scanned the heat shimmering horizon. To the north lay the United States, safety, law, water, home, but standing between them and home were miles of brutal terrain and a border that was less a line on a map and more a scar across the earth. To the south, the direction they had run from, was the cloud of dust kicked up by the Cartel SUV that had been hunting them for the last 3 hours. How did it go so wrong? The question cycled through Rebecca's mind like a warped tape, replaying the regrets over and over. It was supposed to be a cultural trip. Rebecca, an architect recently divorced, had wanted to take her daughter down to Baja to see the coastline, a desperate attempt to bond, to repair the mother-daughter relationship that had fractured after Emily's father moved out. Just a weekend getaway. She wanted to prove she was a fun mom, not just a woman buried in blueprints. But a wrong turn near the port of entry, a damn GPS signal that died instantly, and a shortcut, suggested by a helpful-looking man at a gas station had led them here. The shortcut was a trap. The helpful man was a spotter. And now, her silver sedan was a smoking wreck in a dry arroyo 3 miles back. And she and her daughter were prey in a ruthless hunt. Crunch. The sound of a boot crushing dry rock snapped Rebecca back to the terrifying present. Her breath hitched in her throat. She gently pushed Emily's head lower, covering the girl's bright blonde hair, too conspicuous in this brown and gray wasteland, with her own dusty denim jacket. Rebecca peered through the gaps in the thorny branches. 50 yards away, down the slope of the ravine, 2 men were walking. They didn't look like border patrol. They wore no green uniforms. They wore black tactical vests over civilian clothes, carrying AR-15s with a lethal, casual familiarity. They were scanning the ground, looking for tracks. "They're looking for us," Rebecca thought, the ice-cold grip of terror running down her spine despite the searing heat. These were sicarios, cartel hitmen. If they found them, Rebecca didn't let her mind finish that sentence. She looked at Emily. She would die before she let them touch her daughter. She would tear the world apart with her bare hands if she had to. The two men stopped near a cluster of boulders at the base of the canyon wall. Rebecca held her breath. Had they seen the glint of her watch? The color of Emily's sneakers? One of the men, a tall figure in a black baseball cap pulled low, raised a radio to his lips. He said something, then laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a butcher sharpening a knife. Then, he did something strange. He walked over to what looked like a solid rock face and pulled. A section of the earth seemed to peel away. It was a camouflage tarp, expertly dusted with sand and glued with gravel, thrown back to reveal a dark, square maw in the ground. A hatch. Rebecca's eyes widened. This wasn't just a hideout. This was infrastructure. Concrete reinforced the edges. This was a tunnel entrance. She had read about them in the news, the super tunnels. Marvels of illicit engineering running underneath the border fences. Equipped with ventilation, electricity, and rail tracks, they were arteries of poison, pumping drugs north and pumping money and guns south. The two men descended into the hole. The heavy steel hatch remained open, gaping like an ulcer in the earth. Silence returned to the desert. But the danger felt closer now. "Mom?" Emily whispered again, fear vibrating in her voice like a taut wire. "I hear a truck." Rebecca strained her ears. Thrum, thrum, thrum. A low vibration in the ground. It was coming from the east, the direction they were trying to run toward. She looked up. A massive plume of dust was rising against the cobalt sky. Another patrol unit. They were being boxed in. A pincer movement. If they stayed here, the men in the truck would find their footprints. The desert floor was soft sand. They had left a trail a blind man could follow. "We had to move," Rebecca said, her voice stealing. She wasn't a suburban mom anymore. She was becoming a creature of survival. Adrenaline flooded her system, sharpening her vision, dulling the pain in her blistering feet. "Where?" Emily asked, eyes locked on the approaching dust cloud. Rebecca looked down at the open hatch in the ravine. It was insanity. It was suicide. To willingly walk into the lion's den? To enter the cartel's own highway? But the desert was certain death. The trucks were certain death. The tunnel went north. The tunnel went under the wall. If they could get in, stay hidden, and move fast enough, they might pop out on the American side. It was the only variable the hunters wouldn't expect. The prey doesn't run into the trap. "Emily, listen to me." Rebecca grabbed her daughter's shoulders. She looked into Emily's blue eyes, trying to pour all her remaining strength into the girl. "We are going to play the hardest level of the game now. Okay? You have to be braver than you've ever been. You have to be a ninja. Can you do that?" Emily nodded, her lower lip trembling violently. "Like in the spy movies?" "Yes, better than the movies." Rebecca wiped the sweat stinging her eyes. "We're going down there." She pointed to the black hole. Emily's eyes went wide. "In the dark? It's the only way home. Baby, the only way." Rebecca grabbed their small backpack. She checked her pocket, a pocket knife she used for cutting apples, and a smartphone with 4% battery and no signal. That was her entire arsenal against the most dangerous criminal organization in the Western Hemisphere. "Let's go." Low and fast. They scrambled down the ravine, sliding on loose shale. The sound of the approaching truck grew louder, roaring like a hungry beast, vibrating in Rebecca's teeth. They didn't have minutes, they had seconds. They reached the bottom. The air coming out of the tunnel entrance was cool, but it smelled of damp earth and marijuana, a pungent, skunky odor that made Emily cough. "Cover your mouth," Rebecca hissed. She approached the edge of the hole. A metal ladder disappeared into the gloom. Down below, she could see the faint glow of a string of industrial lights. "I'll go first," Rebecca whispered. "Then you follow. Don't look down at the bottom. Just look at my eyes." Rebecca swung her legs over the concrete lip. She climbed down 3 rungs. Then looked up at her daughter. The blinding sun created a halo around Emily's silhouette. For a moment, she looked like an angel standing at the gates of hell, debating whether to step in to save her mother's soul. "Come on, Em, now." The roar of the truck was right on top of them. Brakes squealed on the ridge. Car doors slammed. Bang, bang. "They're here," Emily cried out, panic exploding. "Jump," Rebecca commanded, reaching up. Emily scrambled onto the ladder. Rebecca guided her down, her heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted to burst. As soon as Emily's head cleared the opening, Rebecca reached up for the heavy steel handle of the hatch. Voices shouted from the ridge above. Spanish, angry, rough voices. "Mira, Ali abajo. Hey huelas aquí. Look, down there. There are tracks here." Rebecca didn't wait a second longer. She pulled the hatch down with all her strength. Clang. The heavy metal slabs slammed shut, sealing them in darkness. The sound of the desert, the wind, the birds, the truck, was instantly severed, replaced by a suffocating, ringing silence. Then, the hum of electricity. Rebecca blinked, her pupils dilating to adjust. They were standing on a concrete floor about 20 feet underground. The tunnel stretched out before them. A long, cylindrical throat reinforced with wooden beams and PVC piping. Dim yellow bulbs hung from the ceiling every 30 feet, casting long, dancing shadows on the dirt walls that looked like grasping ghostly fingers. The air was cooler here, but stale. It tasted of diesel fumes and raw fear. "Mom?" Emily's voice was tiny, echoing slightly off the damp walls. Rebecca pulled Emily close, hugging her tightly. "I'm here. I've got you." She could feel her daughter's small chest heaving. She kissed the top of Emily's dusty head, smelling the sweat and the sun that still clung to her hair. She looked down the tunnel. It seemed to go on forever, vanishing into a vanishing point of shadow. Above them, muffled thuds vibrated through the ceiling. Boots on the ground. They were searching the ravine. It wouldn't take them long to check the hatch. Once they realized the internal latch was locked. "We can't stay here," Rebecca whispered. She looked at the tracks running along the floor, makeshift rails for mining carts. "Which way is north?" Emily asked, clutching Rebecca's shirt, eyes wide as she took in the alien, threatening space. Rebecca closed her eyes for a second, orienting herself. They had come from the south. The tunnel ran perpendicular to the border. "That way." Rebecca pointed into the deep gloom. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her hands. They were alive. They were out of the burning sun, but they had just locked themselves inside a cage with the tigers. "Stay behind me," Rebecca said, drawing the small 3-inch folding knife from her pocket. Under the dim amber light, the blade looked laughable, fragile as a toy. "Hold onto my belt loop. If I stop, you stop. If I run, you run. If I tell you to hide, I hide," Emily finished, her voice shaking but determined. She wiped a tear away with a dirty hand. "Let's go home." Rebecca took the first step. The sound of her sneaker on the concrete echoed, a lonely sound in the belly of the earth. They walked for 5 minutes in silence. The tunnel was a marvel of terrifying engineering. There were ventilation tubes, crates of water, and stacks of packaged bricks wrapped in silver duct tape. Millions of dollars of product, sitting right there, waiting to be pumped into the veins of America. Suddenly, Rebecca froze. Ahead of them, the tunnel curved, and from around the bend, a sound drifted toward them. Music. It was faint, tinny, coming from a cheap radio. Norteño music, with its fast accordion and polka rhythm. And underneath the music, the low murmur of human voices. Guards. Rebecca looked around frantically. The tunnel was narrow, barely 5 feet wide. There were no side rooms, no alcoves, just the crates. "Mom," Emily mouthed, her eyes wide with terror. The voices were getting louder, Footsteps approached the bend. The guards were coming their way. Rebecca grabbed Emily and shoved her into a small gap between a stack of plastic crates and the rough dirt wall. The space was tight, smelling of mold and burnt plastic. "Squeeze in," Rebecca whispered, panic rising in her throat like bile. "Don't breathe." She squeezed in next to her daughter, pulling the edge of a loose, torn tarp over them. Darkness swallowed them like a shroud. Through a small rip in the tarp, Rebecca watched the bend in the tunnel. A shadow stretched across the floor. Then another. 2 men walked into view. One was smoking a cigarette. The ember glowed like a demon's eye in the dark. He carried an AK-47 slung lazily over his shoulder. They were walking slowly, talking and laughing. They were 10 feet away. 8 feet. 5 feet. Rebecca held her breath until her lungs burned. She felt Emily's heart beating against her own back. A frantic thump thump thump. Fast as a hummingbird's wings. The guard with the cigarette stopped, right in front of the crates. He sniffed the air. "Huele a perfume," he said in Spanish. "It smells like perfume." The other guard laughed loudly. "Estás loco, Beto. Llevas demasiado tiempo aquí abajo. You're crazy, Beto. You've been down here too long." "No," the first guard, Beto, insisted. He unslung his rifle, the metal clicking softly. He turned his head, scanning the shadows. His eyes, dark and cold, seemed to drill right into the gap where Rebecca and Emily were hiding. He took a step toward them. The tip of his boot was inches from Rebecca's face. Rebecca gripped the handle of her tiny fruit knife. She knew she couldn't kill 2 armed men. She knew that if that tarp was pulled back, their lives were over right here, in this dirty, dark hole. The guard reached out a hand toward the tarp. The guard's hand hovered in the air, suspended like a pendulum of doom. His fingers were thick, stained with tobacco, nicotine and gun oil, twitching just inches from the blue plastic tarp that separated Rebecca from a bullet in the head. Rebecca stopped breathing. She didn't just hold her breath, she ceased to exist as a biological entity. She forced her body to become stone. Her entire universe shrank down to the dirty fingernails of a man named Beto and the terrified, erratic rhythm of Emily's heart hammering against her ribcage. It was beating so hard Rebecca was sure the vibration would travel through the crates and give them away. Rebecca tightened her grip on the small fruit knife in her pocket. It was a pathetic weapon against an assault rifle, a toothpick against a dragon, but maternal instinct had hijacked her logic. If that hand touched the tarp, she wouldn't beg, she wouldn't freeze, she would drive the 3-inch blade into his wrist. She would bite, she would gouge, she would become something feral. "Do it," a primitive voice screamed in the back of her lizard brain. "Strike first." Beto's fingers curled, ready to grasp the plastic edge. Crackle. Static erupted from the Motorola radio clipped to his tactical vest, shattering the subterranean silence like a gunshot. "Beto. Rico. ¿Dónde diablos están? Beto. Rico. Where the hell are you?" The voice on the radio was distorted by interference but dripping with authority and impatience. Beto flinched violently. His hand snapped back from the tarp as if he'd been burned. He grabbed the radio, his posture shifting from hunter to subordinate. "Aquí, jefe. Sector 4. Revisando la línea. Here, boss. Sector 4. Checking the line. Dejen de perder el tiempo con fantasmas." The voice snapped, tinny and aggressive. "Stop wasting time with ghosts. Prepare the loading dock. The truck is 2 minutes out. Move." Beto looked at the tarp one last time. He frowned, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air again. For a second, agonizing eternity, Rebecca thought he wouldn't obey. She thought his curiosity would outweigh his orders. "Andale, Rico." The other guard shoved Beto's shoulder hard. "You want the boss to come down here himself? Let's go." Beto grunted. A sound of frustration. He turned on his heel, his heavy boots grinding into the dirt floor, and spat on the ground. I smell perfume, I tell you, like vanilla, and sweat. You smell the chemicals, idiot. Acetone messes with your head. Walk. The heavy boots crunched away, retreating down the tunnel in the direction Rebecca and Emily had come from. The fading beam of their flashlights danced wildly on the ceiling cables before disappearing around the bend, taking the immediate threat of death with them. Rebecca let out a breath that was more of a sob. Her muscles, which had been coiled tight as steel springs, suddenly turned to water. She sagged against the hard plastic crate, her forehead resting on the cool surface. The adrenaline crash was instant and dizzying. "Mommy?" Emily whispered. Her voice was so faint it was barely a vibration in the air. "Are they gone?" Rebecca turned and cupped her daughter's face with both hands. In the dim amber light of the tunnel bulbs, Emily looked ghostly pale, her eyes wide, dark pools of trauma. "They're gone, baby, they're gone." Rebecca kissed Emily's forehead. It was cold and clammy, shock setting in. "You did so well. You were so quiet. I'm so proud of you." "I held my breath till my tummy hurt," Emily said, a small tremor running through her lips. "You're a hero," Rebecca whispered, finally holstering the knife but keeping her hand near her pocket. "But we have to move. Now, before they come back with the truck or load more cargo." They crawled out from behind the crates, their limbs stiff. The tunnel stretched out before them, a long, claustrophobic throat of concrete and timber. It wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a sophisticated industrial operation. Thick black power cables ran along the ceiling like snakes. A white PVC pipe, likely pumping fresh oxygen, hummed with a low, constant drone that seemed to burrow into Rebecca's skull. Rebecca took Emily's hand. It felt fragile. Fast walk, soft feet, heel to toe, just like we practiced on the carpet at home. Remember? Ninja feet. Emily nodded. They moved deeper into the earth. The air grew heavier here, thick with the smell of damp soil and the sharp, chemical tang of acetone and ether, the byproducts of crystal meth processing. Rebecca guessed. It stung the eyes and coated the back of the throat. As they walked, Rebecca tried to map the geography in her mind. They were heading north. The border between Mexico and the United States was likely directly above them now. Somewhere up there, hundreds of feet above their heads, were steel fences, ground sensors, thermal cameras, and border patrol agents sitting in air-conditioned SUVs drinking coffee. And here they were, sneaking directly under the most guarded line in the world, unnoticed by the good guys, hunted by the bad guys. The irony, Rebecca thought bitterly, would be funny if we weren't about to die. She thought of her ex-husband, David. He was probably at his condo in Seattle right now, complaining about the rain. If she died down here, would he even know? Or would she and Emily just become two more missing persons statistics on a dusty flyer? No, she shook the thought away. We survive. The tunnel began to change structure. The concrete floor gave way to packed dirt reinforced with wooden planks, resembling an old mine shaft. The ceiling lowered, forcing Rebecca to hunch over slightly to avoid scraping her head on the low-hanging beams. "Mom, my legs hurt," Emily murmured after what felt like 20 minutes of relentless walking. "I need water." "I know, honey, I know." Rebecca scanned the darkness ahead. The string of lights was thinning out, leaving longer stretches of shadow. "We'll stop soon. We just need to find a safe spot." A low rumble cut her off. It wasn't the truck from outside. This was coming from inside the tunnel. It was coming from ahead of them, from the north. VRRRRRRRRRR. The sound of an electric motor, and steel wheels grinding on tracks. A cart. Rebecca realized with a jolt of horror. The tracks on the floor weren't just for decoration. Someone was coming toward them. She looked around frantically. The tunnel here was narrower, barely 4 feet wide, There were no crates to hide behind. No alcoves. Just the dirt walls and the wooden support beams spaced every 5 feet. Hide, Rebecca hissed. Where? Emily spun around, panic rising in her voice. Her eyes darting like a trapped bird. Rebecca looked up. The wooden beams formed a sort of ribcage along the ceiling. Between the horizontal beams and the roof of the tunnel, there was a small gap, maybe 18 inches of shadow, crowded with cables and the ventilation pipe. Up, Rebecca said. She grabbed Emily by the waist. You have to climb up the side. Grab the wood. Squeeze yourself between the pipe and the ceiling. I can't. It's too high. You can. Do it now. Rebecca hoisted her daughter up with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Emily scrambled, her sneakers scraping against the dirt wall, finding purchase on the horizontal timber. She wiggled her small body into the dusty crevice near the ceiling, pressing herself flat against the cool ventilation pipe. Stay there. Don't move a muscle. Don't look down, Rebecca commanded. The rumble was getting louder. A bouncing light appeared in the distance, reflecting off the metal rails. Rebecca looked for a spot for herself. She was too big to fit where Emily was. She scanned the floor. Nothing. No depression in the dirt. No boxes. She looked at the vertical support beam next to her. It was thick, rough-hewn timber, maybe 10 inches wide. The shadows between the beams were deep, cast by the single bulb 20 feet back. Rebecca pressed her back flat against the dirt wall, positioning herself behind the vertical post. She sucked in her stomach, pulling the dark fabric of her jacket tight around her body. She merged with the shadow. If the driver looked straight ahead at the track, he might miss her. If he looked to the side, the electric cart rounded the slight curve. It was a customized, low-riding vehicle, like a modified golf cart, loaded high with blue plastic barrels and black duffel bags. The driver was a young man, barely 20, wearing oversized headphones. He was bobbing his head to music Rebecca couldn't hear. He held a flashlight in one hand, resting it lazily on the steering wheel, while the other hand held a smartphone. The beam of the flashlight swept across the tunnel walls in a rhythmic, careless arc. Left, right, floor, ceiling. Rebecca closed her eyes. Please let him be tired. Please let him be lazy. The cart whirred closer. The wind of its passage stirred Rebecca's hair. The smell of cheap cologne and stale sweat washed over her. The light swept over the post she was hiding behind. For a split second, the beam hit the toe of her sneaker. Rebecca stopped her heart. She waited for the screech of brakes. She waited for the shout. But the brakes didn't screech. The driver didn't stop. He was too busy texting. He was typing a message with one thumb, smiling at his screen, oblivious to the woman standing 2 feet away from him in the dark. The cart rumbled past, the wheels clacking rhythmically on the joints of the track. Clack, 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 clack. Rebecca waited. She waited until the taillights of the cart faded. She waited until the sound was nothing but a ghostly whisper in the distance behind them. Emily? She whispered, peeling herself away from the wall. Her legs were shaking so hard she could barely stand. I'm stuck, a small voice squeaked from the ceiling. Rebecca reached up. Come here. Slide down. I've got you. Emily slid into her mother's arms, covered in dust and cobwebs. She was trembling violently. He had a gun on his lap. She whispered, a silver one. I saw, Rebecca said, brushing the dirt from Emily's face. But he didn't see us. We're ghosts, remember? Ghosts are invisible. I don't like this game anymore. Emily cried softly, tears streaking the grime on her face. I want to go home. Me neither, kiddo. Me neither. Rebecca gave her a quick squeeze. But the only way out is through. They continued north. The tunnel seemed endless, a purgatory of dirt and darkness. Rebecca's mind began to play tricks on her. She saw movement in the shadows that wasn't there. She heard voices in the hum of the ventilation pipe. How long is this tunnel? Some of the super tunnels on the news were nearly a mile long. A mile underground felt like a marathon across the surface of the moon. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up. They stepped into a wider chamber. A subterranean room carved out of the earth. The walls were lined with plywood. There was a folding table cluttered with empty water bottles, a greasy deck of cards, and a row of car batteries charging a lighting system. It was a checkpoint, a break room for the tunnel rats. Rebecca froze, pulling Emily back into the shadows of the tunnel neck. The room was empty. She waited. 1 minute, 2, no sound, no smoke, no movement. "Stay here," she whispered to Emily. Rebecca crept forward, knife in hand, moving like a cat. She checked the corners. Empty. It looked like a shift change area. There was a logbook on the table. She glanced at the open page. Names, times, and weights listed in Spanish. The last entry was 20 minutes ago. Shift change, she thought, a spark of hope igniting. We got lucky. The gap between the guards. But as she looked across the room, her heart sank like a stone. The tunnel didn't continue as a single path. It split. 2 dark openings gaped in the far wall. One tunnel veered left, the other right. There were no signs, no exit markers, no arrows pointing to USA. "Mom?" Emily had crept up behind her, unable to stay alone in the dark. "I'm here," Rebecca said, staring at the 2 holes. "Which way?" Emily asked. Rebecca looked at the ground. There were footprints leading into both. The cart tracks split and went into both. If they chose the wrong one, they could end up in a storage dead end, or a ventilation shaft that went nowhere, or they could walk right into the barracks where the guards slept. Rebecca knelt down, leveling her eyes with her daughter's. "Okay, Emily, I need your eyes. You're better at finding things than I am. Look at the ground. Do you see anything different about the tracks? Anything at all?" Emily squinted, wiping her nose with her sleeve. She stepped closer to the openings. She pointed to the left tunnel. "That one has candy wrappers. And cigarette butts." Rebecca looked. Sure enough, a crushed wrapper lay near the entrance. "And that one," Emily pointed to the right, "has hair?" Rebecca looked closer at the right tunnel. Caught on a splinter of the wooden support beam was a tuft of fur. Gray and coarse, not human hair. Rebecca's blood ran cold. Dogs. The right tunnel was used by the canine units. Or maybe that's where the kennels were. If they went right, they would walk into a wall of teeth. "We go left," Rebecca said instantly. "Good job, Em. You just saved our lives." They moved into the left tunnel. It was tighter, older looking. The timber beams were rotting in places. And the air was more stagnant. The lights were dimmer here, flickering ominously. They walked for another 10 minutes. The silence was heavier here, pressing against their eardrums. Then, Rebecca stopped dead. She held up a hand. "Do you hear that? Water?" Emily guessed. "No." Rebecca strained her ears. It was a rhythmic thumping. Thump, thump, thump. It was getting louder, and it was coming from behind them. From the checkpoint. Not the electric cart. This was faster. Heavy. Wet breathing. The clicking of claws on wood. Rebecca turned around, shining the dim light of her dying phone screen back the way they came. 2 glowing yellow eyes reflected the light. Low to the ground. A growl rumbled through the tunnel. Deep, primal, and vibrating with violence. "Run," Rebecca said. Her voice was calm, but it was the calmness of absolute terror. "Mom? Run," Rebecca screamed, grabbing Emily's hand and yanking her forward. They sprinted. The stealth was over. The game of shadows was over. This was a race for survival. Behind them, the barking exploded, a cacophony of violence echoing off the narrow walls. The dog had found their scent. It was a Belgian Malinois, a fur-covered missile designed to maim and kill. Rebecca didn't look back. She couldn't. She just pumped her legs, ignoring the fire in her lungs. dragging Emily along. "It's coming! It's coming!" Emily shrieked, glancing over her shoulder. The barking was closing the distance. These dogs were faster than any human, let alone an exhausted child. "Keep going, don't stop," Rebecca gasped. The tunnel sloped upward sharply. The ground became slippery with mud. Rebecca's feet scrambled for traction. They were climbing. They were getting close to the surface. But ahead, a metal gate blocked the path. A floor-to-ceiling iron grate. Rusted but solid. "No," Rebecca moaned, slamming into the bars. "No, no, no." She shook the gate. Locked. A heavy padlock secured the chain. The dog was close now. She could hear the wet snap of its jaws. She could hear the heavy paws thudding against the dirt. It was 20 feet away. 10. Rebecca spun around, putting her back to the gate, shoving Emily behind her. "Get behind me," she screamed, her voice cracking. She pulled out her knife. The 3-inch blade shook in her hand. It was useless. She knew it, but she would die fighting. The darkness down the tunnel shifted. A shape emerged, sleek, muscular, and terrifyingly fast. The dog launched itself into the dim circle of light, teeth bared, saliva flying. It didn't stop. It didn't hesitate. It launched itself into the air, aiming straight for Rebecca's throat. Rebecca braced herself, raising her arm to take the bite, screaming a war cry that ripped from the bottom of her soul. Click. A blinding light flooded the tunnel from the other side of the gate behind her. "Down! Get down!" a voice roared in English. Boom! The sound of a shotgun blast in the confined space was deafening. It sucked the air out of the room and punched Rebecca's eardrums. The dog yelped midair, its body twisting violently before crashing to the dirt. Sliding to a halt just inches from Rebecca's feet. It twitched once, then lay still. Silence rang in Rebecca's ears. Smoke, sharp and sulphurous, filled the air. She blinked, stunned, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might vomit. She turned slowly to look through the bars of the gate. Standing there, bathed in the harsh light of a floodlamp, holding a smoking Remington pump-action shotgun, was an old man. He was weathered, his face a map of deep wrinkles and sun damage. He wore dirty overalls and a faded baseball cap that said U.S. Navy. He looked like a badger that had been woken up from a nap, grumpy, dangerous, and completely unimpressed. He racked the shotgun. CHK. A spent shell casing clattered onto the concrete floor. He stared at Rebecca, breathless and wild-eyed, then at the dead Cartel dog, then at the terrified little girl clinging to Rebecca's leg. He spat a toothpick onto the ground. "Well," the old man rasped, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "You two ain't the drug delivery I was expecting." The boom of the Remington 870 shotgun didn't just fade away, it hung suspended in the confined space of the tunnel like a physical bruise. Throbbing violently against Rebecca's eardrums, a high-pitched squeal like a broken siren drowned out every other sound, turning the terrifying reality before her into a slow-motion silent film. Rebecca stood frozen, her chest heaving as if she were trying to inhale the entire room. Her eyes were glued to the black maw of the shotgun barrel, which was still smoking and pointed directly at her chest through the rusted iron bars. The acrid smell of burnt gunpowder mixed with the metallic copper tang of fresh blood, creating a scent of raw, naked violence that assaulted her senses. At her feet, the Belgian Malinois, that biological missile of fur and teeth that had launched itself at her throat seconds ago, was now just a heap of ruined meat, lying motionless in a widening pool of black liquid. "Mom?" Emily's voice pierced through the ringing in Rebecca's ears, sounding shattered and distorted. The maternal reflex overrode the paralysis of fear. Rebecca stepped back, shoving Emily behind her, using her own body as a human shield to block the girl's view of the carcass and the man holding the weapon. She slowly raised her empty hands, palms facing outward, the universal gesture of surrender. "Don't shoot," Rebecca rasped. Her throat felt dry and lacerated, as if she had swallowed a handful of broken glass. "Please, we're not with them." The old man on the other side of the iron gate didn't lower the weapon. He squinted, his eyes narrowing into suspicious slits amidst a roadmap of deep wrinkles and sun-weathered skin. He chewed on a toothpick, shifting it from one corner of his mouth to the other with a deliberate, terrifying slowness. He looked at Rebecca the way a homeowner looks at a cockroach that just scurried across the kitchen floor. "That's exactly what a drug mule would say." The man grunted. His voice was like gravel being ground in a cement mixer, rough, deep, and utterly void of sympathy. "Or a decoy. Send the crying woman and the kid first. Distract the old man, and then the hit squad rushes the gate." He spat a glob of saliva onto the concrete floor on his side. "I ain't stupid, lady. I served 2 tours in the Mekong Delta in '68. I know the smell of a trap better than I know the smell of my morning coffee." "We are not a trap," Rebecca screamed, the terror in her chest transmuting into a desperate, fiery anger. "We are American citizens. My name is Rebecca Miller. This is my daughter, Emily. We were kidnapped. We escaped. Look at us. Do we look like assassins to you?" She took a step toward the bars. The old man flinched, his index finger tightening visibly on the trigger. "Stay back," he barked, the command echoing like a thunderclap. "Face the wall, now." "Listen to me," Rebecca pleaded, tears finally spilling over, cutting clean tracks through the layers of grime on her cheeks. "That gunshot. The guards heard it. They're coming. If you don't open this gate, you are sentencing us to death. Do you understand? They will kill my daughter right here in front of you. Can you live with that on your conscience?" As if to validate her words, a shout echoed from the deep darkness of the tunnel behind them. "Oye, ¿qué pasó? ¿Quién disparó? Hey, what happened? Who fired?" It was distant, but closing in fast, the rhythmic thud of running boots, the clatter of rifles banging against tactical vests. The old man heard it too. His eyes flicked to the shadows behind Rebecca, then snapped back to her tear-streaked face. His gaze dropped to Emily, who was peeking out from behind Rebecca's leg, trembling violently, her wide blue eyes filled with absolute horror. For a split second, Rebecca saw something flicker in the old man's granite-hard eyes. Not kindness, exactly, but recognition. Maybe he saw a ghost from his own past. Or maybe even a heart made of stone couldn't watch a child get torn apart by wolves. He cursed under his breath, a vile string of profanity. God damn it to hell. He lowered the shotgun slightly, tucking the stock under his armpit, and jammed his free hand into the pocket of his greasy overalls. He fished out a heavy ring of keys. "If you try anything," he warned, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "I will put a slug in your chest before you clear the threshold. You understand me?" "Yes," Rebecca sobbed. "Yes, just open it, please." The old man jammed a rusted key into the heavy padlock securing the chain. He twisted. It stuck. "Open up, you piece of junk," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. From the darkness behind Rebecca, the sound of boots running became distinct. Thump thump thump. "Vio luz. Están en la puerta." "I see light. There at the door," a voice shouted. It was Beto, the guard who had smelled her perfume earlier. "They're here," Emily shrieked, burying her face in Rebecca's denim jacket. "Hurry," Rebecca urged, her voice bordering on hysteria. She turned her head. 2 beams of tactical light were cutting through the gloom, dancing wildly on the tunnel walls. Getting larger, brighter, she could see the silhouettes of men sprinting. "Shut up, I'm trying," the old man roared. He used both hands on the key, torquing it with all his strength, veins bulging in his forearms. Click. The padlock popped open. The old man yanked the chain free. the metal rattling loudly against the bars. He kicked the gate. It groaned on dry hinges and swung inward. "Get in. Move your ass." Rebecca didn't need telling twice. She grabbed Emily by the collar and practically threw her through the opening. Diving in after her, she landed hard on the concrete, scraping the skin off her knees. But pain was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Clear," Rebecca yelled, scrambling to her feet. The old man slammed the gate shut. He didn't bother with the padlock immediately. Instead, he grabbed a heavy steel bar leaning against the wall and dropped it into a bracket across the gate, securing it like the door of a medieval fortress. Ping! A spark erupted from the iron bar, inches from the old man's hand. Then came the sound of the shot. Crack! A bullet had struck the gate. The guards were firing. "Get back!" the old man roared, shoving Rebecca and Emily away from the entrance. He pumped the shotgun. CHK. He stepped up to the bars, aimed into the tunnel darkness, and pulled the trigger. Boom! The muzzle flash illuminated the tunnel for a fraction of a second, revealing two figures diving for cover behind the wooden support beams about 30 yards away. "Eat lead, you cockroaches," the old man yelled. He turned and grabbed the wheel of a second door behind the iron gate, a heavy steel blast door that looked like it belonged on a submarine or a bank vault. He swung it closed. It sealed with a heavy, final thud, cutting off the world outside. He spun the wheel mechanism in the center of the door. Steel bolts extended into the concrete frame, locking them in. The shouting, the gunshots, the barking, everything was instantly silenced. The room fell into an artificial quiet, broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the ragged breathing of 3 people. Rebecca collapsed onto her knees, gasping for air. Her lungs burned as if she had inhaled fire. She pulled Emily into her lap, rocking her back and forth. "We're safe," she whispered, though she didn't fully believe it. "We're out." "Safe?" The old man's voice cut through her fragile relief like a knife. "Are you kidding me?" Rebecca looked up. She finally took in her surroundings. This was a bunker, a legitimate doomsday prepper's basement. The walls were poured concrete, lined with industrial metal shelving. But instead of the drugs and guns of the tunnel, these shelves were stocked with rows of canned peaches, Spam, 5-gallon jugs of water, and boxes of ammunition. To the left, a set of wooden stairs led up to a trapdoor in the ceiling. To the right, a workbench was cluttered with tools, gun parts, and a bank of small monitors displaying grainy black and white camera feeds. The old man was reloading his shotgun, his thick, calloused fingers moving with the mechanical efficiency of a machine. He didn't look at them. "Who are you?" Rebecca asked, her voice trembling as the adrenaline crash left her cold and shaking. "Name's Silas," he grunted, shoving the last shell into the tube. He set the gun down on the workbench and turned to face them. Crossing his arms over his chest, he looked them up and down, his gaze critical and unimpressed. "You look like hell, lady. We've had a bad day," Rebecca replied, wiping a smear of blood from her cheek. "Thank you for saving us." Silas snorted, a sound of derision. "I didn't save you. I just didn't want my property value to go down any further. Dead bodies stink up the place, and the coyotes make a mess digging them up." He walked over to a mini fridge in the corner, pulled out a plastic bottle of cold water, and tossed it to Rebecca. She caught it clumsily. "Drink. Give it to the kid. She looks like she's about to pass out." Rebecca cracked the seal and handed it to Emily. The girl drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, washing away the dust. "Slow down, Em," Rebecca murmured. She looked around the room again. Is this your house?" "Basement," Silas corrected. "My house is upstairs, or what's left of it." He walked over to the bank of monitors. He tapped a screen with a dirty fingernail. "Look." Rebecca stood up on shaky legs and walked over. On the grainy screen, She saw a wide-angle view of the desert floor outside. She saw the ravine where she and Emily had entered the tunnel. And she saw the truck. Men were swarming around the tunnel entrance like ants. A second pickup truck was tearing across the desert, kicking up dust, carrying more gunmen. "They know you're here," Rebecca said, a fresh wave of nausea hitting her stomach. "They've known I'm here for 20 years," Silas said, staring at the screen. "I bought this land before the wall was built. Before the cartels got this bold. They tried to buy me out. I said no. They tried to scare me out. I shot back." He pointed a finger at the heavy blast door they had just come through. "So, they went under me, dug that damn tunnel right under my foundation. I found it 3 months ago when I heard them drilling at night. I installed the gate, welded it myself. Figured I'd block 'em off if they ever tried to come up this way." He turned his sharp gaze to Rebecca. "But they never tried to come up. Until today. Because of you." Rebecca felt the weight of the accusation. "I'm sorry. We didn't know. We were just running." "Well, you ran into a dead end," Silas said grimly, "because now, you've given them a reason to surface." "What do you mean?" Silas tapped another monitor. This one showed the front of a small, dilapidated ranch house. A dusty dirt road led away toward a distant highway. "That tunnel is their highway," Silas explained. "You just disrupted traffic. And you've seen their operation. You've seen faces. You think they're gonna let you just walk away?" "We have to call the police," Rebecca said, patting her pockets. "My phone is dead. Do you have a landline?" Silas laughed. It was a dry, bitter bark. "Lady, I live 3 miles off the grid. No phone lines out here. Cell service is spotty at best. And the cartel uses signal jammers when they're moving a shipment. Which they are." He picked up a handheld radio scanner from the desk. It was crackling with static and rapid-fire Spanish. "Listen," Silas said. "Roden la casa. Nadie sale. El patron los quiere vivos. Surround the house. No one leaves. The boss wants them alive." Rebecca's blood went cold. "They're surrounding the house." "Yep," Silas said calmly, unwrapping a stick of gum and popping it into his mouth. "Siege tactics. They cut the power lines 10 minutes ago. I'm running on backup generators now. They'll wait for nightfall. Then they'll come in." He looked at Emily, who had finished the water and was sitting on an ammo crate, hugging her knees to her chest. "You brought a storm to my doorstep, Mrs. Miller," Silas said softly, but with gravity. "I hope you know how to shoot. Because I only got 2 hands." Rebecca stared at the old man. The relief of escaping the tunnel had vanished, replaced by a new, more claustrophobic terror. They weren't safe. They had just traded a hole in the ground for a fortress under siege. "I've never held a gun in my life," Rebecca admitted. Silas sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He walked over to a gun rack on the wall, bypassing the heavy rifles, and pulled down a smaller weapon, a Ruger Mini 14 with a wooden stock. He tossed it to Rebecca. She caught it, the cold steel and oiled wood heavy in her hands. "Well," he said, moving toward the wooden stairs that led up to the house. "Today's a good day to learn." "Where are we going?" Rebecca asked, holding the gun awkwardly. "Upstairs," Silas said. "Down here is a rat trap. If they blow the blast door, we cook in here. We need the high ground." He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at them. The harsh overhead light cast deep shadows over his eyes, making him look like a skull. "Welcome to the Alamo, ladies. Try not to die." Silas climbed the stairs, his boots thudding heavily. Rebecca looked at the rifle in her hands. It was an instrument of death. She looked at Emily. "Mom?" Emily asked, her voice small and trembling. "Are the bad men coming inside the house?" Rebecca gripped the rifle tighter. She thought of the fear in the tunnel. She thought of the cold eyes of the guard named Beto. She thought of how close she had come to losing everything. Something inside her shifted. The panic crystallized into a cold, Hard resolve. She walked over to Emily, knelt down, and looked her daughter in the eye. "They're going to try, baby," Rebecca said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But Mr. Silas and I aren't going to let them." She stood up. She racked the bolt of the rifle just like she had seen Silas do, clumsily, but effectively, and pointed the barrel toward the ceiling. "Come on," Rebecca said. "Let's go upstairs." As they climbed the wooden stairs out of the safety of the bunker and into the fading light of the desert afternoon, Rebecca realized one thing. The woman who had entered the tunnel an hour ago was dead. That woman was a victim. The woman climbing these stairs was a survivor. And God help anyone who tried to touch her daughter now. The trapdoor groaned as Silas pushed it open, revealing the underside of a dusty Persian rug. He folded the rug back, and the three of them emerged from the cool, sterile air of the bunker into the suffocating heat of the ranch house. The house smelled of old paper, dry rot, and the phantom scent of a life long abandoned. It was a bachelor's grave, filled with stacks of National Geographic magazines, taxidermy deer heads with glass eyes that seemed to judge the intruders, and furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. The sky was a bruised purple and blood orange, casting long, stretching shadows across the living room floor. "Keep your heads down," Silas hissed, moving with a hunch that made him look like a predatory bird. "Stay away from the windows." Rebecca crawled across the hardwood floor, dragging the heavy Ruger Mini 14 with one hand and pulling Emily along with the other. "Into the kitchen?" she whispered. "No, hallway," Silas commanded, pointing to the central corridor of the house. "No windows in the hallway. Put the girl in the linen closet. It's got extra drywall. Best cover we got." Rebecca guided Emily into the narrow closet. It smelled of mothballs and lavender. She cleared a space on the floor, pushing aside stacks of old towels. "Mom, don't leave me," Emily whimpered, grabbing Rebecca's sleeve. Her small fingers were white-knuckled. "I'm not leaving, baby. I'm going to be right outside this door." Rebecca lied. She kissed Emily's forehead. "You need to cover your ears. It's going to get loud. Okay? Like fireworks on the 4th of July." "I hate fireworks," Emily whispered. "I know. Just close your eyes and count. Count to 1,000. When you get to 1,000, I'll be back." Rebecca closed the closet door, leaving it cracked just an inch so Emily wouldn't be in total darkness. She turned around. Silas was standing by a window in the living room, peering through a small slit in the wooden boards he had nailed over the glass. "Come here." Silas waved her over. "Don't stand up. Crawl." Rebecca shimmied across the floor until she was beside him. "Look," Silas said, pointing to the slit. Rebecca put her eye to the crack. The desert was transforming. The beautiful, deadly landscape was being swallowed by twilight. About 200 yards away, near the tree line of mesquite bushes, she saw them. Silhouettes. They weren't hiding anymore. 3 trucks were parked in a semicircle, their headlights off. Men were moving between them, checking weapons, putting on vests. She counted 6, no, 8, maybe 10. "They're waiting for the sun to go down completely," Silas muttered, shifting a toothpick in his mouth. "They don't want muzzle flashes to be seen from the highway, even if it is miles away. Professional courtesy. There are so many of them." Rebecca breathed, her stomach churning. "Silas, we can't fight them. We have to run." "Run where?" Silas looked at her, his face hard as granite. "Open ground? They have night vision. They have trucks. You make it 50 yards. They cut you down. In here, we have walls. We have angles. In here, I decide who dies." He grabbed the barrel of the rifle Rebecca was holding and yanked it up. "You know how to use this? Point and shoot?" Rebecca guessed, her hands sweating on the wood stock. "No, that's how you miss and hit my damn TV." Silas grumbled. He grabbed her shoulder and positioned her against the wall. "Listen to me. Because your life depends on it. This is a Ruger. Semi-automatic, 1 trigger pull, 1 bullet. The safety is here. He clicked a small metal tab near the trigger guard. Forward is fire. Back is safe. He tapped the magazine. You got 20 rounds. Don't spray and pray. Pick a target. Aim for the center of mass, the chest. If you hit the vest, you knock him down. If you hit the gut, they bleed out. Just put them on the ground. Rebecca looked at the gun. It felt alien, an object of pure malice. I don't know if I can kill someone. Silas leaned in close. His breath smelled of peppermint and stale tobacco. Lady, look out that window. Those men aren't here to ask for directions. They are here to put a bullet in your head and sell your daughter to people who will do things to her that you can't even imagine. Now, you tell me, can you kill someone? The image Silas painted was visceral and horrific. It cut through Rebecca's moral hesitation like a scalpel. She thought of Emily in the closet, counting towels. Rebecca's grip on the rifle tightened until her knuckles turned white. Her jaw set. Yes, she said, I can. Good. Silas patted her shoulder, a rough, awkward gesture of approval. You take the kitchen window. It faces the rear. Don't let them flank us. I'll take the front. If you see movement, you shoot. You don't ask, who's there? You shoot. Rebecca nodded and crawled into the kitchen. The kitchen was dark. The appliances were from the 70s. Avocado green and bulky. The sink was full of dirty dishes. It was a mundane setting for a last stand. Rebecca positioned herself by the window over the sink. Silas had boarded this one up too. But he had left a loophole, a small square cut out of the plywood for shooting. She rested the barrel of the rifle on the windowsill. The metal was cool against her cheek. She waited. Time stretched. The sun vanished, leaving a purple afterglow that slowly faded into ink black. The silence of the desert was heavy, amplified by the buzzing of a fly against the windowpane. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. Rebecca's arms began to ache. Her eyes played tricks on her. Was that a bush moving? Or a man? Was that the wind? Or a footstep? Then, the phone in her pocket vibrated. She jumped, nearly dropping the gun. She pulled it out. 1% battery. No signal. Just a calendar notification. Emily's dental appointment, tomorrow 9 a.m. The absurdity of it made her want to laugh and vomit at the same time. The real world, the world of dentists and traffic and groceries, felt like a dream she had woken up from. Crash. The sound of shattering glass came from the living room. Here we go, Silas roared. Boom, boom, boom. The shotgun unleashed hell. The sound in the house was deafening. A physical pressure that slammed against Rebecca's chest. Contact front. Silas yelled. Watch the back. Watch the back. Rebecca stared out into the darkness of the backyard. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Thump, thump, thump. She saw a shadow detach itself from the darkness of the barn. Then another. 2 men were sprinting toward the back porch. They were fast, moving in a crouch. Stop, Rebecca screamed, her voice cracking. They didn't stop. They raised their weapons. Rebecca squeezed the trigger. Click. Nothing happened. Panic, cold and absolute, flooded her veins. Why didn't it fire? Is it broken? One of the men reached the porch steps. He was raising an AR-15. She could see the moonlight glinting off the barrel. The safety. Silas's voice echoed in her memory. Forward is fire. Rebecca fumbled with the trigger guard. Her fingers slippery with sweat. She pushed the metal tab forward. The man was at the window. He grabbed the plywood, trying to rip it off. Rebecca closed her eyes, screamed, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The rifle kicked back into her shoulder hard, bruising the bone. The sound was sharp, high-pitched compared to the shotgun. She opened her eyes. The plywood was splintered. The man was gone. Had she hit him? Put them down, Silas yelled from the other room, followed by the racking of his shotgun. Rebecca looked through the loophole. The man was on the ground near the porch steps, clutching his leg, rolling in the dirt. The second man had dived behind the water tank. She had shot someone. She didn't feel triumph. She felt sick. A wave of nausea rolled over her, but she swallowed it down. Bang! Bang! Bullets shredded the plywood around her face. Splinters flew into her hair. "Get down," she screamed to herself, dropping to the linoleum floor. The man behind the water tank was providing covering fire. Bullets punched through the thin walls of the kitchen, blowing apart a cabinet door, shattering a jar of pasta sauce. Red sauce splattered across the floor like blood. "Rebecca, report," Silas bellowed during a lull in the shooting. "Two in the back," Rebecca yelled back, surprised by the ferocity of her own voice. "One down, one suppressing. Keep their heads down, don't let them get close to the wall." Rebecca popped up, fired 2 rounds blindly toward the water tank, and ducked back down. The siege settled into a terrifying rhythm. Suppression, movement, fire, scream. The house was being chewed apart. Bullets were turning the dry wall into Swiss cheese. Dust hung in the air like fog, illuminated by the flashing strobe lights of muzzle flares. In the linen closet, Rebecca hoped Emily was counting loud enough to drown out the war. Suddenly, silence returned. It was more terrifying than the noise. "Silas?" Rebecca called out. "I'm here," the old man grunted, reloading. "Why did they stop?" "Probing attack," Silas said, his voice raspy. "Testing our defenses, seeing where we shoot from, counting our guns." Rebecca crawled into the hallway. The air was thick with smoke. Silas was sitting with his back against the sofa, wrapping a handkerchief around his left forearm. "You're hit," Rebecca gasped. "Just a graze. Wood splinter or a bullet fragment. Doesn't matter." He tied the knot tight with his teeth. He looked at her. His eyes were bright, alive with the adrenaline of combat. "You did good, kid. I heard that Ruger singing." "I shot a man," Rebecca whispered. "You stopped a threat," Silas corrected. "There's a difference." He stood up, checking his shotgun, but that was just the appetizer. "Now they know we're fighting back. They won't come softly next time." "What will they do?" Silas walked to the window and peered out cautiously. "If I were them, I wouldn't waste men charging a fortified position. I'd flush the rats out." "Flush us out how?" As if in answer, a sound cut through the night. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a hissing sound. Like a snake, but massive. Then, a flicker of light. Rebecca looked toward the front window. An object was arcing through the air, trailing a tail of fire. It looked beautiful, almost magical against the black sky. It was a glass bottle filled with gasoline. A rag stuffed in the neck was burning. "Molotov!" Silas screamed. "Move!" Crash! The bottle smashed through the upper pane of the living room window. Bypassing the boards, it shattered against the far wall, right above the old bookshelf. Whoosh! Fire didn't just start, it exploded. The gasoline coated the dry books, the curtains, the old carpet. Within seconds, a wall of orange flame roared to life, climbing the curtains toward the ceiling. The heat was instantaneous and blistering. "Put it out," Rebecca yelled, looking around for a non-existent extinguisher. Too late. Silas grabbed her arm. "This house is a tinderbox. It's gonna go up in minutes." Another crash from the kitchen. Another bottle. "They're burning us out," Silas coughed, the smoke already filling the room. "Thick and black. They want us to run out the front door so they can pick us off like ducks in a barrel." "Emily." Rebecca broke free from his grip and scrambled toward the linen closet. She ripped the door open. Emily was curled in the corner, hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. 1,200, she was whispering. "Emily, we have to go." Rebecca grabbed her. "Is it over?" Emily asked, coughing as the smoke hit her lungs. "No, we have to move, now." They ran back to the living room. The fire had consumed half the room. The heat was scorching Rebecca's eyebrows. The roar of the flames was louder than the gunfire had been. The basement. Rebecca yelled to Silas. "We have to go back to the bunker." "No," Silas shouted over the roar of the fire. "The heat will suck the oxygen out of the bunker. We'll suffocate in 10 minutes. We have to leave the house." "Go outside? You said they'd cut us down." "Not out the front," Silas said, eyes scanning the room frantically. "The truck. My truck." "Where?" "The garage. Attached to the west side." Silas pointed through the smoke toward a door off the kitchen. "If we can get to the truck, we can ram through the garage door. Catch them off guard." "It's suicide," Rebecca said. "Staying here is cremation," Silas barked. He grabbed a heavy wool blanket from the sofa. Threw it over Emily and Rebecca. "Stay low. Follow me. Don't stop for anything." Silas raised his shotgun and kicked open the kitchen door. The kitchen was already partially aflame. They ran through the inferno. The heat blistering their skin. The smoke blinding them. They burst into the garage. It was cooler here, smelling of oil and gasoline. Sitting in the center was a 1990 Ford F-250. It was a rusted beast. Built like a tank, with a heavy steel brush guard on the front bumper. "Get in," Silas yelled, fumbling with his keys. Rebecca threw Emily into the middle seat and scrambled in after her. Silas jumped into the driver's seat. He turned the key. Chug, chug, chug. The engine turned over but didn't catch. "Come on, you son of a bitch," Silas snarled, pumping the gas pedal. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. The cartel was watching the house burn, waiting for the screams. Chug, chug, chug. Vroom. The V8 engine roared to life, spitting black smoke. Silas slammed the truck into gear. He looked at Rebecca. "Put your seatbelt on. This is gonna hurt." He didn't aim for the garage door opener. He aimed for the garage door itself. "Hold on." Silas floored the accelerator. The tires squealed on the concrete. The truck lunged forward like an angry rhino. Crash. The wooden garage door shattered into a million splinters. The truck flew out into the cool night air, debris raining down on the hood. They were out. But as the truck landed hard on the dirt driveway, headlights flooded the cab. Directly in front of them, blocking the driveway, was a cartel pickup truck, and mounted in the bed of the truck was a heavy machine gun, manned by a silhouette who was already swiveling the barrel toward them. Silas's eyes went wide. "Hang on." He didn't brake. He accelerated. The laws of physics are cruel, but they are also fair. Force equals mass times acceleration. And as Silas's 1990 Ford F-250, 3 tons of Detroit steel and rage, barreled toward the lighter, modern Toyota Tacoma blocking the driveway, the equation was simple. "Brace," Silas roared, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Rebecca threw her arm across Emily's chest, pinning the girl into the seat cushion. She squeezed her eyes shut. Crunch. The impact was not a sound, it was a tectonic event. It felt like the world had been dropped from a skyscraper. The heavy steel brush guard of the Ford slammed into the side of the cartel pickup with the violence of a sledgehammer hitting a soda can. Metal screamed. Glass exploded in a glittering shower of diamonds. The Ford shuddered violently, the seatbelt biting deep into Rebecca's collarbone, knocking the wind out of her. Through the spider-webbed windshield, Rebecca saw the laws of physics claim their toll. The cartel pickup was shunted sideways, tires screeching across the dirt. The gunman standing in the truck bed, who had been swinging his machine gun toward them, was launched into the air like a rag doll. He cartwheeled into the darkness, his weapon clattering uselessly onto the gravel. "Go, go, go," Silas screamed at the dashboard, stomping the accelerator to the floor. The Ford's rear tires spun, finding purchase on the loose dirt, then bid down, with a roar of triumph. The old truck shoved the wreckage of the Tacoma aside, scraping past with a shower of sparks, and surged onto the open desert road. "Is everyone alive?" Silas shouted, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "I think so," Rebecca gasped, checking Emily. The girl was shaking, her eyes wide and unblinking. But she nodded. "We're okay." "Check the back," Silas commanded. Rebecca twisted in her seat to look out the rear window. The scene behind them was apocalyptic. Silas's ranch house was now a towering inferno. Flames licking 50 feet into the night sky, illuminating the desert like a twisted beacon. Silhouetted against the fire, she saw figures running, and headlights. "They're coming," Rebecca said, the dread pooling in her stomach. 2 trucks, maybe 3. "Let him come," Silas grunted. He reached down and killed the headlights. The world instantly plunged into pitch blackness. "What are you doing?" Rebecca cried, clutching the dashboard. "You can't see." "I don't need to see," Silas snapped. "I know this land. They don't. If I leave the lights on, I'm just a target." He drove by moonlight. The desert flew past in a blur of gray shadows and black shapes. Giant saguaro cactuses loomed up like sentinels, rushing past the windows with inches to spare. The truck bucked and heaved over ruts and rocks, the suspension groaning in protest. It was a terrifying, bone-rattling ride. Rebecca felt every bump rattle her teeth. Emily was crying softly, a continuous, high-pitched whimper. "Hold on, kiddo." Silas softened his voice for a fraction of a second. "We're going off-road." He jerked the wheel hard to the left. The truck slammed off the dirt road and plowed straight into the scrubland. Mesquite bushes whipped against the sides of the truck, screeching like banshees. The ride became even more violent. "Where are we going?" Rebecca yelled over the roar of the engine. "The Arroyo Seco," Silas shouted back. "Dry riverbed about a mile north. The walls are steep. If we get in there, they can't flank us. We lose their line of sight." "They have headlights." Rebecca pointed behind them. 2 pairs of piercing LED beams were cutting through the darkness, bobbing violently as the Cartel trucks followed them off-road. They were faster vehicles, lighter and with better suspension. They were closing the gap. Pop, pop, pop. Gunfire. Rebecca saw the muzzle flashes in the rearview mirror. Bullets whizzed past the truck. One struck the tailgate with a metallic clang. "They're shooting." "Get down," Silas yelled. "Head between your knees." He swerved the truck wildly, fishtailing in the sand to make them a harder target. "Grab the wheel," Silas suddenly barked at Rebecca. "What?" "Grab the damn wheel. Keep it straight." Rebecca reached over the center console and seized the vibrating steering wheel. Silas released it. He rolled down his window. The rushing wind roared into the cabin, bringing dust and the smell of sage. He grabbed his shotgun from the seat beside him. He rested the barrel on the side mirror, driving with his knees, aiming backward with one hand. It was madness. It was cowboy insanity. Boom. Silas fired a slug back into the darkness. He pumped the slide one-handed, clack clack, and fired again. Boom. Behind them, one of the pursuing trucks swerved sharply. Maybe he hit a tire. Maybe the driver just flinched. But the truck spun out, crashing into a large chala cactus in a cloud of dust. "One down," Silas crowed, pulling himself back inside and grabbing the wheel from Rebecca. "Good job, co-pilot." But the victory was short-lived. A red warning light flared on the dashboard. Temp. Steam began to hiss from under the hood, white wisps curling up against the windshield. "Damn it," Silas cursed, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. "The radiator. We must have cracked it when we rammed them." "Can we keep going?" Rebecca asked, eyeing the temperature needle which was burying itself in the red zone. "Not for long. The engine block will seize up in a few minutes." They were losing speed. The engine was coughing, sputtering. The remaining Cartel truck was gaining on them. its high beams flooding the cab with blinding light, casting their shadows onto the dashboard. "We need the riverbed," Silas muttered. "Come on, old girl, just a little further." The ground suddenly dropped away. "Hang on." The truck pitched forward over a steep embankment. For a heart-stopping second, they were airborne. They slammed down into the dry riverbed with a bone-shattering crash. The suspension bottomed out. The front bumper dug into the sand. The truck skidded, fishtail-ed, and finally ground to a halt in a cloud of steam and dust. The engine died. Silence returned, instant and heavy. "Out," Silas hissed. "Everybody out, now." He kicked his door open. Rebecca scrambled out her side, dragging Emily with her. The sand was cool under her feet. The riverbed was a deep scar in the earth, with walls of dirt rising 10 feet on either side. It was a natural trench. "The truck is dead," Silas whispered, grabbing a backpack from behind the seat in his shotgun. "We move on foot, into the shadows. They'll see the truck," Rebecca whispered, looking up at the embankment they had just launched off. "That's the point," Silas said. "The truck is the decoy. We go north, fast." He grabbed a canteen from the pack and handed it to Emily. "Drink while you walk, do not stop." They ran. The sand in the riverbed was deep and soft, sucking at their shoes, making every step an effort. It was like running in a nightmare. Behind them, headlights appeared at the top of the embankment. The cartel truck had reached the edge. They froze, pressing themselves into the deep shadows of the riverbank, hidden by the overhanging roots of a mesquite tree. Rebecca held her hand over Emily's mouth. High above them, 2 car doors opened. Men stepped out, silhouetted by the headlights. "Están aquí abajo." "They're down here," a voice shouted. Flashlight beams cut down into the canyon, sweeping over the steaming wreck of Silas's truck. The beams played over the smashed windshield, the empty seats. "Say fur and a pie." They went on foot, another voice said. This one was calm, commanding. "Bring the dogs." Rebecca's blood froze. "Dogs." She looked at Silas. In the moonlight, the old man's face was pale. He was clutching his left arm, the one he had bandaged earlier. Fresh blood was seeping through his shirt sleeve. The crash had reopened the wound. Or worse. Silas met her eyes. He tapped his ear, signaling her to listen. From the truck above came the excited yipping and barking of hounds. Not just one dog this time. A pack. "We can't outrun dogs in this sand," Rebecca whispered, panic rising in her throat. "And you're bleeding. They'll smell it." Silas didn't argue. He looked at the terrain. The riverbed wound through the desert like a snake. "We don't need to outrun them," Silas whispered. "We need to mask the scent." "How?" Silas pointed ahead. "About a half-mile up. There's an old drainage pipe. Runs under the highway. It's full of chemical runoff. Creosote. Oil. Smells like hell. If we can get inside, the fumes might confuse the dogs." "A half-mile?" Rebecca looked at Emily. The girl was stumbling, her eyes drooping with exhaustion. "She can't run that far." "Silas." "She has to," Silas said grimly, "or she dies." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bottle. "Amphetamines? Painkillers?" He dry swallowed 2 pills. "Let's go." They moved again. The trudge through the sand was agonizing. Every breath burned Rebecca's lungs. Her legs felt like lead. Behind them, the flashlights descended into the riverbed. The hunt was on. Emily tripped, falling face first into the sand. She didn't get up. She just lay there, sobbing quietly. "I can't," she wept. "My legs won't work." Rebecca dropped to her knees. "Emily, please, get up. I want to go home. I want my bed." "We are going home," Rebecca said, her voice cracking. She looked back. The lights were closer, maybe 400 yards. Silas stopped. He looked at the girl, then back at the pursuers. He looked at his shotgun. He had maybe 5 shells left in the tube and a box in his pocket. Pick her up, Silas said. She's too heavy for me to carry in this sand, Rebecca admitted, shame washing over her. I'll carry her, Silas said. Your arm. Pick her up and put her on my back. Piggyback. Do it. Rebecca lifted Emily. Silas grunted in pain as the weight settled on him, his knees buckling slightly before he straightened up. The veins in his neck bulged. You take the gun, Silas said, nodding to the shotgun hanging by its strap. You take point. If you see anything with glowing eyes, you shoot it. Rebecca took the heavy weapon. It felt charged with electricity. They moved forward, a strange, desperate caravan, an old wounded man carrying a child, led by a mother-turned-soldier. The sound of the dogs was getting louder. They were baying now, the sound of predators who have locked onto a scent. Faster, Silas wheezed. His breathing was ragged, wet. I see it, Rebecca whispered. Ahead, looming out of the darkness like the mouth of a cave, was a concrete culvert. It was massive, 6 feet in diameter, half buried in the sand. A trickle of black, oily sludge oozed out of it. The smell hit them instantly. It smelled of sulfur, rotting garbage, and industrial waste. It was Revolt NG. Get in, Silas gasped, dropping to one knee to let Emily slide off. They scrambled into the pipe. The sludge coated their shoes, slippery and vile. Back, Silas ordered. Move back as far as you can. They retreated 20 feet into the pipe. The darkness was absolute. The air was toxic. Quiet now, Silas whispered. He slumped against the curved concrete wall, clutching his arm. They waited. Outside, the noise of the pursuit grew closer. The beam of a flashlight slashed across the opening of the pipe, illuminating the sludge. The barking was frenzied. The dogs were right outside. A key, a voice said, dangerously close. Lose the track here. L'odor's terrible. The smell is terrible, another voice complained. Damned chemical dump. A dog barked at the entrance of the pipe. Rebecca raised the shotgun, her finger trembling on the trigger. If the dog came in, she would have to shoot, and the gunshot would echo like a cannon in this pipe, deafening them all, and telling the cartel exactly where they were. A shadow fell across the opening. A man, he was standing right there. He shined his light into the pipe. Rebecca pressed herself into the sludge, holding her breath. The light swept over the water, the trash, the oil. Did it reach them? Were they deep enough? The light lingered. Hey Algo, is there anything? Someone asked from the riverbed. The man at the entrance sniffed, spat into the sludge, and kicked a rock inside. The rock skipped across the water, splashing dirty liquid onto Rebecca's boot. She didn't flinch. Nada, the man said. No dog would go in there. It burns the nose. They must have climbed out the other side of the wash. Vamonos, arriba, let's go, up. The shadow moved away. The footsteps receded. The dogs whined, confused by the chemical stench, and were pulled away. Rebecca let out a breath she had been holding for a minute. The air in the pipe tasted like poison, but it was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. They're gone, she whispered. There was no answer from Silas. Silas? Rebecca reached out in the dark. Her hand touched his shoulder. It was wet, soaking wet. Silas? I'm here, the old man mumbled. His voice was slurred, weak, just resting my eyes. Rebecca fumbled for her phone. She turned on the screen for a brief second to use as a light. The blue glow illuminated the pipe. Silas was slumped against the wall. His complexion was gray, the color of ash. The bandage on his arm was saturated. But that wasn't the problem. There was a dark, spreading stain on the side of his overalls, just above his hip. You were shot, Rebecca breathed, horror seizing her. In the truck, when you shielded us. Silas cracked one eye open. He managed a weak, lopsided grin. Told you, I knew the terrain, he whispered. We We made it to the pipe. His head lolled forward. Silas. Rebecca shook him. Don't you dare die. You hear me? We don't know where to go. North. Silas breathed, his voice barely audible over the dripping water. Follow the North Star. Blue Canyon. My brother. His eyes closed. His breathing became shallow, a rattling sound in his chest. Rebecca sat in the dark, stinking pipe, holding the hand of a dying stranger. Emily was asleep against her leg, exhausted into unconsciousness. They were alive, but their guide was fading. And outside, the desert was waiting to finish what the cartel had started. The drainage pipe was a tomb of concrete and shadow, echoing with the rhythmic drip of toxic sludge. The air was thick with the chemical stench of creosote and old oil. A smell that coated the back of Rebecca's throat like grease. But beneath that industrial rot, there was another smell, sharper, metallic, and terrifyingly familiar. The smell of blood. Rebecca knelt in the muck, the blue light of her dying cell phone casting a ghoulish pallor over Silas's face. The old man looked smaller now, as if the life draining out of him was taking his physical substance with it. His breathing was wet and ragged, a sound like dry leaves rattling in a paper bag. Silas, Rebecca whispered, her hand pressing uselessly against the dark, soaked fabric of his overalls just above his hip. Silas, stay with me. We can fix this. It was a lie, a desperate, foolish lie. The wound was deep, a ragged hole torn by a heavy caliber bullet or a piece of jagged shrapnel during their escape. He had bled too much. The fact that he had carried Emily a half-mile through the sand with a hole in his side was a biological impossibility. It was a testament to a willpower that was now finally flickering out. Silas's eyelids fluttered. He focused on Rebecca, his pupils pinned and glassy. Stop lying, he wheezed. A line of blood trickled from the corner of his mouth into his gray beard. I'm punched fast. Don't talk like that. Tears burned Rebecca's eyes, hot and stinging. You saved us. You can't just leave us here. I ain't leaving you. Silas coughed, his body seizing with a spasm of pain that made him grip Rebecca's wrist with surprising strength. I'm giving you orders. He fumbled with his free hand, reaching into the front pocket of his bloody overalls. His fingers, clumsy and trembling, pulled out a heavy object. It wasn't a weapon. It was a silver Zippo lighter, battered and scratched, with an emblem welded onto the front, a trident and an eagle. The Navy SEAL insignia. Take it, he commanded, his voice a dry rasp. Rebecca took the cold metal in her hand. It felt heavy, burdened with history. My brother, Silas gasped, fighting for every syllable. Elias. He's crazy. Crazier than me. He lives in Blue Canyon, north, 10 miles. Blue Canyon, Rebecca repeated, etching the words into her brain. Show him the lighter. Silas whispered. Tell him the ghost sent you. Tell him the Alamo fell. The Alamo fell. Rebecca nodded, a sob catching in her throat. Ghost, lighter, Blue Canyon. He won't shoot you if he sees that, Silas said, a faint, grim smile touching his lips. Probably. He groaned, his head lolling back against the curved concrete wall. The gun. Take the shotgun. 4 shells left. Don't hesitate. Rebecca. Hesitation is death. I know, Rebecca said. I know. Silas looked past her, toward the sleeping form of Emily curled up on a dry patch of concrete further down the pipe. His expression softened, the hard edge of the warrior melted away, leaving just a tired old man. She's a good kid, Silas murmured. His eyes began to lose focus, staring at something Rebecca couldn't see. Maybe he was seeing the jungle again. Maybe he was seeing his burnt-down house. Keep her in the dark. Keep her. His voice trailed off. The chest that had been heaving with such effort suddenly stilled. The rattling breath stopped. Silas Stone, veteran, recluse, savior, was gone. Rebecca sat in the silence of the pipe. The only sound the dripping water and the beating of her own heart. She waited for the grief to overwhelm her, for the breakdown that felt inevitable. But it didn't come. Instead, a cold numbness settled over her. It was a protective shell. A psychological armor. If she broke down now, if she curled up and cried over the body of this stranger, Emily would die. It was that simple. Grief was a luxury. Survival was a job. Rebecca moved. She reached out and gently closed Silas's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered into the dark. Then, she went to work. She stripped the ammo belt off Silas's shoulder. She took the small flashlight from his pocket. It was dead. Batteries drained, but she took it anyway. She took his pocket knife. She checked his wallet, $40 in cash and an old photo of two young men in uniform standing in front of a helicopter. Silas and Elias. She stood up, her legs cramping. She picked up the Remington shotgun. It was heavy, slick with sweat and oil. She racked the slide, making sure a shell was chambered. She walked over to Emily. "Em," she whispered, shaking the girl's shoulder gently. "Em, wake up." Emily groaned, swatting at the air. 5 more minutes. "Mom." The normalcy of the request broke Rebecca's heart more than the violence had. "No, baby, we have to go, right now." Emily sat up, rubbing her eyes. The smell of the sludge hit her, and she gagged. Memory rushed back into her face, the tunnel, the fire, the crash. "Where's Mr. Silas?" Emily asked, looking toward the dark shape further down the pipe. Rebecca moved her body to block Emily's view. "Mr. Silas he's staying here. He's going to guard the rear. He told us to go ahead." It was another lie. Rebecca was building a house of lies to shelter her daughter. "Is he okay?" "He's resting," Rebecca said, her voice steady. "Come on, grab onto my belt. Don't let go." They walked toward the end of the pipe. Rebecca didn't look back at the body. She couldn't. They stepped out of the culvert and into the night. The desert had changed. The heat of the day was a distant memory, replaced by a biting, dry cold that sank straight into the bone. The temperature had dropped 40 degrees. Rebecca shivered, pulling her thin denim jacket tighter. Emily was wearing only a t-shirt and light pants. "I'm cold, Mom," Emily chattered, wrapping her arms around herself. Rebecca took off her jacket and draped it over Emily's shoulders. "Wear this. Keep moving. Walking makes heat." Rebecca stood in her tank top, the cold air raising gooseflesh on her arms instantly. She looked up. The sky was a vast, indifferent dome of stars, billions of diamonds scattered on black velvet. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly terrifying. Silas said north. Rebecca whispered. She looked for the Big Dipper. She found the ladle shape, traced the line from the 2 pointer stars, and found Polaris, the North Star. It hung low on the horizon, steady and unblinking. "That way," Rebecca pointed, into the brush. They left the riverbed, climbing the steep bank on the opposite side from where the cartel had come. They moved into the open scrubland. The terrain was brutal. It wasn't flat sand, it was a torture garden of chala cactus. Sharp rocks, and ankle-breaking ravines. Every step was a negotiation with the earth. For an hour, they walked in silence. The only sounds were the crunch of their shoes and the distant yipping of coyotes, real coyotes this time. Not the human kind. Rebecca's mind began to drift. She thought of her office in Seattle. The smell of fresh coffee. The quiet hum of her computer. It felt like a life lived by someone else. The woman holding the shotgun, shivering in the Sonoran desert, was a primal version of herself she hadn't known existed. "Mom," Emily whispered, "I have to pee." Rebecca stopped, scanning the horizon. "Okay, just go behind that bush. Don't go far. I'm right here." As Emily stepped behind a mesquite bush, Rebecca crouched down, resting the shotgun on her knee. She was exhausted. Her body was running on fumes. She closed her eyes for a second. Snap! A twig broke. Rebecca's eyes flew open. The sound hadn't come from Emily's direction. It came from the left. She raised the shotgun, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Emily?" she whispered. "I'm here, Mom." Emily's voice came from the right. Rebecca swung the barrel to the left, peering into the shadows. A shape was moving there, low to the ground. A wolf? A cartel scout? The shape moved again, stepping into a patch of moonlight. It was a javelina, a desert peccary. A wild pig with tusks. Looking at her with beady, nearsighted eyes. It snorted, smelling the intruders, then turned and trotted away into the darkness. Rebecca let out a breath, lowering the gun. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Paranoia was setting in. Every shadow was a gunman. Every cactus was a sentry. "Mom?" Emily returned, pulling the oversized denim jacket around her. "What was that?" "Just a pig," Rebecca said, standing up. "Just a pig." "Can we stop?" Emily pleaded. "My feet hurt. I have blisters. We can't stop here. We're too exposed. We need to find cover before the sun comes up." Silas had said Blue Canyon was 10 miles north. In this terrain, at night, with a child, they were moving at maybe 2 miles an hour. They wouldn't make it before dawn. And when the sun came up, the cartel would have drones. They would have eyes in the sky. "Just a little further," Rebecca coaxed. "I promise." They trudged on. The cold deepened. Rebecca's teeth were chattering so hard her jaw ached. She held the shotgun tight against her chest, trying to steal some warmth from the metal. But it was ice cold. Around 4 a.m., the terrain began to change. The flat scrubland gave way to rising rock formations. Strange, twisted pillars of sandstone jutted out of the earth like broken teeth. "Mom, look," Emily pointed. Ahead of them, looming against the star-filled sky, was a ridge. It wasn't the canyon yet, but it was high ground. And at the base of the ridge, there was a dark depression. A cave? Or just an overhang? "Let's check it out," Rebecca said. They scrambled up a loose scree slope, sliding back 1 step for every 2 they took. Finally, they reached the overhang. It was a shallow cave, barely 10 feet deep, carved by wind and rain. But it was dry, and it blocked the wind. "Inside," Rebecca said. They crawled into the small space. It smelled of dust and animal droppings. But it was shelter. "We rest here," Rebecca said, "just for a few hours." She gathered some dried tumbleweeds that had blown into the corner and piled them up to make a crude mattress. They sat down, huddled together. Rebecca pulled Emily onto her lap, wrapping the single denim jacket around both of them. Emily fell asleep almost instantly, her small body twitching with exhaustion. Rebecca sat awake, the shotgun across her lap, staring out at the slice of desert visible from the cave mouth. She was alone, truly alone. Silas was dead. Her husband was 1,000 miles away. The police were unreachable. The cartel was hunting her. She touched the pocket of her jeans, feeling the cold metal of the Zippo lighter. The Alamo fell. She turned the lighter over in her hand. Why had Silas given this to her? Why help a stranger at the cost of his own life? Because he was a soldier. She realized. And soldiers need a mission. She and Emily had become his final mission. "I won't fail you, old man," she vowed silently. "I will get her to Blue Canyon." As the first gray light of dawn began to bleed into the eastern sky, painting the desert in hues of lavender and gray, Rebecca saw something. Far in the distance, to the south, where the smoke from the burning ranch house had finally dissipated, she saw dust rising. Vehicles. They weren't giving up. They were tracking the footprints from the riverbed. They knew Silas was dead. They would have found the body in the pipe by now. They knew it was just a woman and a child. Rebecca checked the shotgun. 4 shells. She looked at the rising sun. The heat would return soon. The killer sun. Wake up, Emily, Rebecca whispered, shaking her daughter. No, Emily moaned. Wake up. Rebecca's voice was sharp. The monsters are awake, so we have to be awake too. Emily sat up, rubbing her eyes. Misery etched on her dirty face. Do you see those rocks up there? Rebecca pointed to the top of the ridge above their cave. We have to climb over that. On the other side is Blue Canyon. How do you know? Emily asked. Because, Rebecca lied, holding up the Zippo lighter so it caught the first ray of sunlight. Gleaming like a beacon, because I have the magic key. She stood up, her legs stiff and screaming in protest. She pulled Emily to her feet. Let's go find a ghost. The sun was no longer a celestial body, it was a weapon. It had risen over the eastern ridge an hour ago, transforming the freezing desert night into a broiler. The air shimmered with heat haze, distorting the horizon into a watery mirage. Every breath Rebecca took felt like inhaling hot sand. One more step, Rebecca rasped, her voice a dry croak. Just one more step, Em. They were climbing the spine of a jagged ridge that Silas had pointed toward, or at least the direction he had indicated before the life left his eyes. The terrain here was alien and hostile. The flat scrubland had given way to a chaotic jumble of red sandstone, sharp scree, and boulders the size of houses that had tumbled down eons ago. Emily didn't answer. She was moving like a zombie, her small feet dragging in the dust. She was still wearing Rebecca's oversized denim jacket, refusing to take it off despite the heat, using it as a shield against the sun and the world. Her face was streaked with dirt and dried tears, her lips parched and cracking. Water, Emily whispered. It was the only word she had said for the last mile. Rebecca shook the canteen Silas had given them. It sloshed, maybe 3 mouthfuls left. At the top, Rebecca promised. Lying again. Lying had become her primary survival tool. We drink at the top. They scrambled up a steep incline of loose shale. Rebecca used the butt of the heavy Remington shotgun as a walking stick, digging it into the ground to pull herself up. Her muscles burned with lactic acid. Her knees screamed in protest. Finally, they crested the ridge. Rebecca collapsed onto a flat rock, pulling Emily down beside her. She unscrewed the canteen cap and handed it to her daughter. 2 swallows, Rebecca cautioned. Emily drank, her throat working convulsively. She lowered the bottle, leaving a tiny sip at the bottom. She looked at her mother, offering the backwash. You drink, Mom. Rebecca looked at the water. She was dying of thirst. Her tongue felt like a piece of felt in her mouth, but she shook her head. Save it, I'm okay. She capped the canteen and looked north. Her breath caught in her throat. Below them, the earth simply opened up. It wasn't just a canyon, it was a wound in the planet. The red rock of the desert floor was slashed by a deep, winding crevasse, but unlike the sun-bleached red of the surface, the shadows deep inside this canyon were cool and dark, tinting the rock walls a bruised, deep indigo. Blue Canyon. It's real, Rebecca whispered. Silas wasn't crazy. It looked like a fortress. The walls were vertical, rising hundreds of feet. The entrance was a narrow bottleneck, barely wide enough for a truck, guarded by towering spires of rock. Is that where the ghost lives? Emily asked, looking down into the shadows. That's where we're going, Rebecca said. But getting there meant crossing 2 miles of open, exposed ground, a flat, frying pan basin between their ridge and the canyon mouth. And they weren't the only ones in the desert. The sound was faint at first, like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. But it wasn't natural. It didn't fluctuate like an insect. It was a constant, mechanical whine. Rebecca froze. She looked up, scanning the blinding blue sky. Get down, she hissed, grabbing Emily's jacket and pulling her into the shadow of a boulder. Don't move, don't look up. What is it? Shush. Rebecca peeked out from the rock. She saw it, a small, black cross shape hovering about 500 feet in the air to the south. A drone. It wasn't a military predator, but a high-end commercial quadcopter, the kind realtors used for aerial shots, or cartels used for scouting. It was drifting slowly, panning back and forth, scanning the ridgeline. They were being hunted by a robot. The drone paused. It hovered. Then, it rotated. Its camera lens, like an unblinking black eye, seemed to point directly at their hiding spot. Rebecca's heart hammered against the dusty rock. If it saw them, it would mark their GPS coordinates. The trucks would be here in 20 minutes. She held her breath, gripping the shotgun. Can I shoot it? No, it was too high. A shotgun spread would dissipate before it reached it. Shooting would just give away their position. The drone hovered for an agonizing 10 seconds. Then, abruptly, it tilted forward and zipped away to the west, following the line of the ridge. It missed us. Rebecca exhaled, but not for long. We have to cross the basin. Now. They scrambled down the north side of the ridge, sliding on their butts, kicking up dust clouds that Rebecca prayed the drone wouldn't see. They hit the flat ground and ran. Or rather, they shuffled. A run was impossible. They moved at a fast, stumbling limp. The sun beat down on them with hammer blows. The heat waves radiating off the ground distorted the canyon entrance, making it look like it was moving away from them. Left foot, right foot, don't fall. Mom, I'm dizzy, Emily mumbled, swaying. I know, baby, focus on the blue rocks. Just look at the blue. Halfway across the basin, 1 mile to go. Rebecca looked back. Dust. A plume of brown dust was rising over the ridge they had just descended. They found the tracks. Rebecca realized with a jolt of pure adrenaline. The drone might have missed them, but the ground scouts hadn't. Faster, Emily. Rebecca grabbed the girl's hand and yanked her forward. I can't, Emily cried, stumbling. Rebecca didn't argue. She slung the shotgun across her back. She bent down and scooped Emily up into her arms. The girl was heavy, dead weight in the heat, but fear gave Rebecca a surge of hysterical strength. She ran. She ran until her lungs burned like fire. She ran until black spots danced in her vision. Behind her, she heard the distant roar of engines cresting the ridge. They were coming. The mouth of Blue Canyon loomed ahead. It was massive, terrifying, and beautiful. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as they neared the shadow of the cliffs. 50 yards, 20 yards. Rebecca stumbled into the shade of the towering canyon walls. She collapsed, dropping to her knees, gasping for air so hard she thought she would vomit. She let Emily slide to the ground. They were in. The canyon was narrow here, the walls squeezing in. The ground was rocky, strewn with boulders. It was silent as a cathedral. We made it, Rebecca wheezed. Ping. A rock 3 inches from Rebecca's knee exploded into dust. Crack. The sound of a high-powered rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls a split second later. Get down, Rebecca screamed, throwing herself over Emily. Go back, a voice boomed. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, amplified by the acoustics of the canyon. Turn around and walk away, or the next one goes through your skull. Rebecca pressed her face into the dirt. A sniper, of course. We can't go back, Rebecca screamed into the rocks. The cartel is right behind us. They'll kill us. Not my problem, the voice echoed. It was deep, distorted. This is private land. Trespassers get buried. Silas sent me, Rebecca yelled. Silence. The echo of her shout faded. The wind whistled through the rocks. Silas sent me, she repeated, desperation shredding her voice. He's dead. They killed him. He told me to come here. He told me to find the ghost. More silence. Long, agonizing seconds ticked by. Rebecca expected another bullet. She tightened her body around Emily, waiting for the impact. Stand up, the voice commanded, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them. Kick the shotgun away. Rebecca slowly rose to her knees. She unslung the Remington and slid it across the dirt. Away from her, she stood up, raising her trembling hands. The girl too, the voice said. She's just a child. Rebecca sobbed. Please. Stand up, girl. Emily stood up, clinging to Rebecca's leg, hiding her face. Walk forward, 10 paces. Stop at the flat rock. Rebecca walked. Her legs felt like jelly. She counted the steps. 1, 2, 10. She stopped. She scanned the canyon walls. She saw nothing, just red rock, scrub brush, and shadows. Then, a bush moved. High up on the canyon wall, about 100 feet away, a section of the rock shifted. A man stood up. He was wearing a ghillie suit, a suit made of burlap, netting, and desert brush that made him perfectly invisible against the terrain. He held a long-range sniper rifle aimed directly at Rebecca's chest. He began to descend, moving down the steep rock face with the agility of a mountain goat. He never lowered the rifle. He reached the ground and walked toward them. He was terrifying. He was taller than Silas. Leaner. His face painted in streaks of brown and tan camouflaged grease. He wore a boonie hat adorned with local vegetation. Under the ghillie suit, he wore tactical gear that looked worn but well maintained. He stopped 20 feet away. His eyes, visible through the face paint, were startlingly blue, piercing, cold, but they were the same eyes as Silas's. Silas is dead? The man asked. His voice was quiet now. Dangerous. Yes, Rebecca whispered. Last night, in the drainage pipe under the highway. He was shot helping us escape. The man stared at her. He didn't blink. He didn't show grief. He showed calculation. Silas doesn't help people, the man said. He hates people. He moved out here to get away from people. Why would he die for you? I don't know, Rebecca said honestly. Maybe he was tired of watching them win. The man shifted his grip on the rifle. You got proof? Or did you just read his name on a mailbox and come up with a sob story to use me as a shield? He gave me something, Rebecca said. Show me, slowly. Rebecca reached into her jeans pocket. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. She pulled out the Zippo lighter. She held it up. The silver glinted in the canyon shadow. The trident and the eagle. The man froze. He stared at the lighter. For a moment, the dangerous sniper vanished, replaced by a man looking at a ghost. He carried that every day. The man murmured. Since Vietnam. He said it was his luck. He told me to give it to you. Rebecca said, her hand shaking. He said to tell you, the Alamo fell. The man lowered the rifle. The barrel pointed to the dirt. He let out a long, slow breath that seemed to deflate his entire posture. The Alamo fell, he repeated softly. It was obviously a code. A shared brotherly shorthand for a situation where there was no way out. Only a good death. He looked at the entrance of the canyon. He tilted his head, listening. The sound of engines was audible now. The cartel trucks were crossing the basin. You brought company, the man said. It wasn't a question. They're coming, Rebecca said. A lot of them. They have a machine gun. The man, Elias, looked at Rebecca. Then at Emily. He walked forward and snatched the lighter from Rebecca's hand. He flipped the lid open and shut. Clink, clink. Silas always was a soft touch for a stray dog. Elias muttered, even if he pretended not to be. He turned and looked up the canyon. Run, Elias said. What? Run up the canyon. About half a mile. There's a cut in the rock to the left. A cave system. Go deep. Hide. What are you going to do? Rebecca asked. Elias turned back to the canyon entrance. He reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a remote detonator. He knelt down and picked up Rebecca's shotgun, tossing it back to her. You said Silas died fighting, Elias said. his blue eyes burning with a cold, terrifying fire. "Well, I can't let him have all the fun. Can I?" He pointed at the narrow bottleneck entrance of the canyon, the only way in. "This is Blue Canyon, lady," Elias said, a cruel smile breaking through his face paint. "It's not a home, it's a kill box, and I've been prepping it for 10 years. He thumbed the safety off his sniper rifle. "Go. Don't come out until the shooting stops. Or until the canyon collapses." "Thank you," Rebecca breathed. "Don't thank me yet," Elias growled, turning his back on them to face the approaching dust cloud. "Get the kid underground. It's about to get loud." Rebecca grabbed the shotgun and grabbed Emily's hand. "Come on, Em, run." They sprinted deeper into the indigo shadows of the canyon. Behind them, Elias, the ghost, stone lay down in the dirt, merged with the earth, and sighted his scope on the entrance of his domain. He whispered something to the lighter in his hand, then placed it gently on the rock beside him. He waited. The first cartel truck roared into view, kicking up sand, entering the narrow throat of the canyon. Elias exhaled, his finger tightened on the trigger. Let them come. Patience is a weapon, in the hands of a master. It is deadlier than a bullet. Elias Stone lay motionless on a jagged shelf of rock, 70 feet above the canyon floor. His ghillie suit, a masterful tapestry of burlap, dried sage, and netting, rendered him invisible. To the naked eye, he was just another shadow in a canyon full of them. To the hawk circling above, he was a bush. But to the men in the trucks below, he was the reaper. Through the Leopold scope of his M24 sniper rifle, the world was magnified and clarified. He watched the heat shimmer rising off the hood of the lead pickup truck, a black Ford Raptor with modified suspension and armor plating on the doors. The convoy was cautious. They weren't stupid. They knew they were entering a fatal funnel. The lead truck moved at a crawl, the gunner in the back scanning the cliffs with binoculars. "Come on," Elias whispered, his voice barely a breath. "Just a little further. Come into my parlor." He didn't have his finger on the trigger of the rifle. His thumb rested on a small, black plastic remote control. The lead truck passed a distinctive white rock on the canyon floor, a marker Elias had placed 3 years ago. The second truck followed, then the third. The entire convoy was now inside the bottleneck. The walls rose sheer on both sides, trapping them in a corridor of stone. Elias pressed the button. Boom! The explosion wasn't under the trucks. It was above them. High on the canyon wall, directly over the entrance, a shaped charge of C4 detonated. It didn't spray shrapnel. It shattered the structural integrity of a massive slab of sandstone. Tons of rock, boulders the size of compact cars, detached from the cliff face and rained down. Gravity did the rest. The landslide crashed onto the rear of the convoy, crushing the third truck instantly. The sound was apocalyptic, the screech of tearing metal drowning in the thunder of impacting stone. A massive cloud of red dust billowed up, choking the canyon. The exit was sealed, the trap was shut. "Panic," Elias murmured, shifting his aim. Below, the remaining 2 trucks slammed on their brakes. Men spilled out, coughing in the dust, shouting orders in Spanish, firing their weapons wildly at the clifftops. They were spraying bullets at ghosts. Elias settled the crosshairs on the chest of the man who looked like the leader, a guy in a blue tactical shirt pointing and screaming near the lead truck. Elias exhaled. He paused between heartbeats. Crack. The rifle kicked against his shoulder. Down in the kill box, the man in the blue shirt dropped as if his strings had been cut. The pink mist of the impact was lost in the swirling dust. 1. Elias counted. He worked the bolt. Clack clack. A brass casing spun through the air, glinting in the sun. The cartel soldiers scrambled for cover behind the trucks. They were pinned, they were blind, and they were dying. Deep inside the fissure of the cave, The earth shook. Rebecca sat with her back against the cold stone wall, her arms wrapped tight around Emily. The boom of the explosion had vibrated through the rock, resonating in their bones. "Is it an earthquake?" Emily whimpered, pressing her face into Rebecca's chest. "No," Rebecca whispered, clutching the Remington shotgun with white-knuckled intensity. "It's Elias. He's closing the door." The cave was dark, smelling of bat guano and ancient dust. It wasn't a room, it was a crack in the mountain that twisted back into the darkness. A faint shaft of light filtered in from the entrance about 50 feet away, illuminating the floating dust motes. Outside, the war raged. Crack, crack. The rhythmic, deliberate sound of the sniper rifle. Then, the chaotic, ripping sound of automatic weapons returning fire. "Cover your ears, baby," Rebecca said. "Just keep counting." She checked the shotgun again. 4 shells. That was it, if they got past Elias. She looked at the entrance of the cave. It was a narrow slit, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. It was a good defensive position. But she was an architect, not a soldier. She knew about load-bearing walls, not fields of fire. Suddenly, the rhythm of the battle changed. Whoosh, boom. A heavier explosion shook the ground. An RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade. They have heavy weapons. Rebecca realized. The cartel wasn't just a gang, it was a paramilitary force. She stared at the slice of sunlight at the cave entrance. A shadow flickered across it. Rebecca stopped breathing. It wasn't Elias. The movement was too jerky. Too fast. Someone had flanked the kill box. Elias cursed as a rocket slammed into the cliff face 10 feet below his perch, showering him with razor-sharp rock shards. "They're waking up," he grunted, wiping blood from a cut on his cheek. The cartel soldiers had realized the sniper was high up. They were using smoke grenades now. Thick purple and gray smoke filled the canyon floor, obscuring his vision. Through the thermal scope, he could see heat signatures moving. They were splitting up. One group was suppressing his position with heavy machine gun fire from the Raptor. Another group, 3 heat signatures, was moving along the canyon wall, using the boulders for cover. They were heading toward the cave. "Damn it," Elias hissed. He couldn't shoot them. The angle was too steep. They were in his blind spot, moving under the shelf of the cliff. He keyed his radio, then remembered Rebecca didn't have one. He had to move. He rolled away from the ledge, leaving the sniper rifle. It was useless for close quarters. He grabbed the MK-18 carbine strapped to his chest, a shorter, faster weapon for a faster fight. He scrambled backward, sliding down a hidden chute in the rock that led to a lower terrace. He had to beat them to the cave, or the woman and the kid were dead. Rebecca saw the shadow again. Then, a boot. A man stepped into the shaft of light at the cave entrance. He was coughing, waving the dust away. He wore a tactical vest and held an AK-47. He peered into the gloom of the cave. "A key, hey una cueva. Here, there is a cave," he shouted back to his comrades. He stepped inside. Rebecca didn't hesitate. The fear that had paralyzed her in the tunnel was gone. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a person entering the cave, it was a threat to her daughter. She raised the shotgun. She didn't aim for the head or the leg. She aimed for the center of the silhouette, just like Silas had taught her. Boom! The shotgun blast was deafening in the enclosed space. The man flew backward as if he'd been kicked by a mule. He slammed into the rock wall and slid down, his weapon clattering to the floor. "Mom!" Emily screamed. "Stay down." Rebecca racked the slide. Clack clack. A second man appeared at the entrance, firing blindly into the dark. Rat-tat-tat. Bullets sparked off the stone walls, whining like angry bees. Rock chips sprayed Rebecca's face. She flinched, ducking behind a protrusion of rock. She couldn't shoot, he was suppressing her. Granada, grenade, the man yelled. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. She saw the man's arm pull back to throw. Whip. A sound like a suppressed sneeze. The man at the entrance jerked. A small red hole appeared in his neck. He gurgled, dropping the grenade at his own feet. He collapsed forward. Run, a voice roared from outside. It was Elias. Boom. The grenade exploded outside the cave entrance. The concussive blast blew dust and debris into the cave, knocking Rebecca backward. Her ears rang with a high-pitched squeal. She coughed, waving her hand through the dust. Clear, Elias shouted. He dove through the smoke. Rolling into the cave, he came up in a crouch, his carbine scanning the darkness. He saw the dead man Rebecca had shot. He saw Rebecca shielding Emily. He looked at the dead man again. A center mass hit. Not bad, Elias grunted. You got him. There was another one, Rebecca gasped, her hearing slowly returning. I got him, Elias said, but there's a third, and the rest of the squad is pushing up. He moved to the cave entrance, peeking out cautiously. We can't stay here, Elias said. They know where we are. They'll bring the heavy machine gun around and turn this cave into a meat grinder. Where do we go? Rebecca asked. This is a dead end. No, Elias said. He turned and pointed into the deep darkness at the back of the cave. This isn't just a cave. It's a vent. A vent? This canyon, it's volcanic. Old lava tubes. This system goes back for miles. It comes out on the other side of the ridge, near the old mining road. He reached into his pack and pulled out 2 chemical light sticks, glow sticks. He snapped them, shaking them until they glowed a bright, eerie green. He tossed one to Rebecca. It gets tight, Elias warned, and there are drops. If you fall forever. Stay close. He looked at Emily. Kid, you like climbing? Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her dusty face. Well, learn to love it, Elias said, harsh but honest. Let's move. They retreated deeper into the earth. The cave narrowed until they had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The air grew stale and hot. Behind them, they heard voices at the cave entrance. The cartel had regrouped. Entren, sequenlos, go in, get them out. Flashlight beams cut into the darkness behind them. They're following, Rebecca whispered. Let them, Elias said. He stopped at a narrow choke point in the tunnel. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small, clay-like brick, C4. He slapped it onto the tunnel ceiling. He inserted a detonator and set a timer for 30 seconds. Move, Elias shoved Rebecca forward. Run. They scrambled through the dark, their green glow sticks bobbing like fireflies. The tunnel sloped downward, then sharply upward. Boom. A dull thud echoed through the rock. A blast of wind pushed past them, smelling of dust and explosives. That collapsed the entrance, Elias said, not slowing down. Nobody is following us now. We just buried them. We're trapped, Rebecca said, panic rising again. No, we're moving forward, Elias corrected. They walked for what felt like hours. The lava tube was a nightmare landscape of twisted rock, sharp obsidian formations, and utter silence. Rebecca's legs were trembling. Emily was stumbling, barely awake. Finally, the air changed. It smelled fresh, cooler. Exit, Elias said. They climbed a final slope of loose gravel and emerged into the blinding light of the afternoon. They were on the other side of the mountain range. The Red Canyon was behind them. Before them lay a vast, flat expanse of white salt flats, shimmering in the heat. And in the distance, maybe 5 miles away, was a ribbon of black asphalt. Highway 191. Civilization, Rebecca breathed. Elias scanned the horizon with his binoculars. He lowered them slowly. Don't celebrate yet, he said. What? We collapsed the tunnel. They can't follow. The ground team can't, Elias said, pointing to the sky. But he can. Rebecca looked up. Hovering in the distance, much larger than the drone from before, was a helicopter, a Black Bell 407. It was sweeping the desert floor, moving toward the salt flats. The boss, Elias spat. He's tired of sending monkeys. He came himself. The helicopter banked. It had seen them. There's no cover, Rebecca said, looking at the flat, white earth. Nowhere to hide. Elias looked at the highway. Then at the helicopter. Then at the shotgun in Rebecca's hand. How many shells you got left? 3. Elias checked his own magazines. I got 1 full mag. And a sniper rifle with 5 rounds. He looked at Rebecca. For the first time, the hardened warrior looked tired. But his eyes were still burning with that same blue fire Silas had possessed. We can't outrun a chopper on the flats, Elias said, so we stop running. He walked to the center of the salt flat. He dropped his heavy pack. He knelt down and set up his sniper rifle on the tripod. We make a stand here? Rebecca asked, incredulous. In the open? It's the only chance, Elias said. He has to come low to land or to shoot. If he comes low, we shoot the pilot, Rebecca finished. Silas would have loved you. Elias chuckled darkly. Yeah, we shoot the pilot. The helicopter roared closer, the sound of the rotors chopping the air like a giant cleaver. Dust swirled up from the salt flat. A door on the side of the helicopter slid open. A man in a suit sat there, holding a machine gun. Get behind me, Elias ordered. When I say fire, you pump that shotgun and you aim for the rotor tail. I'll take the cockpit. Rebecca knelt in the salt, the white crystals digging into her knees. She raised the Remington. The helicopter dipped its nose, swooping in for the kill. Wait for it, Elias whispered, his finger on the trigger. Wait for it. The wind from the rotors whipped their hair, stinging their eyes. The noise was deafening. Now. The sound of a helicopter at close range is not a noise, it is a physical assault. The THWUP of the rotor blades beats against the chest cavity, vibrating the ribs and rattling the teeth. The downdraft, the rotor wash, hit the salt flat like a hammer, kicking up a blinding white blizzard of crystal dust. Rebecca narrowed her eyes against the stinging grit. She gripped the Remington shotgun. Her knuckles white. She was kneeling in the open, a tiny speck of defiance on a vast white canvas. Beside her, prone in the dirt, Elias was a statue. He lay perfectly still, his cheek welded to the stock of his sniper rifle. His body relaxed despite the tons of metal screaming toward them at 100 miles an hour. Hold. Elias's voice was calm, cutting through the roar of the engine like a knife. Let him commit. The Black Bell 407 banked sharply, its nose dipping. It looked like a giant, angry wasp. In the open side door, the gunman leaned out, the muzzle of his automatic weapon flashing. The sound was like canvas ripping. A line of white geysers exploded in the salt 20 feet to their left. Walking steadily toward them, pop, 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 pop. The bullets were chewing up the earth, searching for flesh. Now, Elias barked. Rebecca didn't aim. She couldn't. She just pointed the shotgun toward the black shape looming in the sky and pulled the trigger. Boom. She pumped the slide. Clack, clack. Boom. The buckshot was useless at this range, like throwing sand at a tank, but it served its purpose. It was a tracer. It was a challenge. The pilot, startled by the muzzle flashes coming from the woman, instinctively jerked the stick. The helicopter flared, the tail swinging around. For a split second, the aircraft hung suspended in the air, broadside to Elias. The cockpit glass glinted in the sun. Elias exhaled. He found the gap between heartbeats. Crack. The report of the sniper rifle was sharp, distinct, a period at the end of a sentence. The effect was instantaneous. The helicopter didn't explode. It shuddered. The smooth, predatory arc of its flight suddenly turned jagged. The nose pitched up violently. Then dropped. The engine whined, a high-pitched scream of mechanical distress. The pilot was dead, or dying, slumped over the cyclic control. "Get down," Elias roared, rolling onto his back and covering his head. Rebecca threw herself over Emily, burying the girl's face in the salt. The helicopter began to spin. Without a pilot to counter the torque of the main rotor, the tail rotor pushed the machine into a death spiral. It fell out of the sky like a stone. Crunch. The impact shook the ground. The helicopter slammed into the salt flat 50 yards away. The skids collapsed. The fuselage crumpled, and the main rotors struck the earth, shattering into 1,000 deadly shards of shrapnel that flew through the air like scythes. One of the rotor blades cartwheeled past them, slicing through the air with a terrifying whoosh, burying itself deep in the salt 10 feet from where Emily lay. Then, the fuel tank ruptured. Whump! A ball of orange fire rolled up into the blue sky, followed by a plume of oily black smoke. The heat washed over them. A momentary blast of the oven door opening. Silence returned to the desert, broken only by the crackling of the flames and the distant ringing in Rebecca's ears. She lifted her head slowly. The white salt was now marred by a black, burning scar. "Is it over?" Emily whispered, her voice muffled by Rebecca's chest. Rebecca looked at the burning wreckage. No one was crawling out of that. The cabin was an inferno. The boss, the man who had hunted them across borders, through tunnels, and over mountains, was gone. Ashes to ashes. "Yes," Rebecca said, tears of pure exhaustion finally spilling over. "It's over. Baby, it's finally over." Elias stood up slowly. He brushed the salt from his ghillie suit. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. He walked over to the wreckage, keeping his rifle raised, just in case. He watched the fire for a moment, then lowered the weapon. He turned back to them. The face paint on his cheeks was smeared with sweat and dirt, but his blue eyes were clear. "Good distraction," he said to Rebecca. "Stupid, but good. You told me to shoot." Rebecca countered, her voice shaking as the adrenaline dumped out of her system, leaving her limbs trembling. "I told you to aim for the tail." Elias grunted. "You aimed for the nose." "I hit something." She shrugged, managing a weak smile. "Yeah, you hit the jackpot." Elias looked toward the horizon. The ribbon of black asphalt, Highway 191, was still miles away. The heat waves were shimmering off the salt. "We're not out yet," Elias said, ever the pragmatist. "We need water. We need a ride. And we need to get off this flat before the Federals or the rest of the cartel show up to investigate the crash." He offered a hand to Rebecca. She took it. His grip was rough, calloused, and strong. He pulled her to her feet, then reached down and scooped Emily up. "You're getting heavy, kid," Elias muttered, hoisting Emily onto his shoulders. "I'm 8, Emily said, resting her chin on his camouflage hat. "I'm supposed to be heavy." "HMPH. Let's walk." The trek to the highway was the longest 5 miles of Rebecca's life. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, bone-weary ache. Her feet were blistered. Her lips were cracked. The sun beat down on them without mercy, reflected off the white salt until Rebecca felt like she was walking inside a light bulb. She focused on the back of Elias's head. She focused on Emily's dusty sneakers bouncing with his stride. She focused on the memory of Silas in the drainage pipe. "North," he had said. "Follow the North Star." They had done it. They had survived the tunnel, the dogs, the fire, the sniper, the helicopter. They reached the edge of the salt flat as the sun began to dip low in the west, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. The ground turned from salt to scrub brush, then to gravel, and then pavement. Rebecca stopped. She looked down at her feet. She was standing on the white line of the road shoulder. The asphalt was warm, solid, and real. It smelled of tar and civilization. "We made it," she whispered. The highway was empty, a long, straight line stretching into infinity. "Now we wait," Elias said. He set Emily down. He walked a few feet away and sat on a guardrail, facing the desert, his back to the road. He pulled out the Zippo lighter and flicked it open and closed. Clink, clink. "Elias?" Rebecca asked. "Yeah? What will you do when the police come?" Elias looked at the lighter. "I won't be here when the police come." "But, you saved us. You're a hero." "I'm a ghost, remember?" Elias stood up. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Ghosts don't give statements. Ghosts don't go on CNN." He pointed down the road. Headlights. Big rig, coming north. Rebecca looked. Sure enough, the twin lights of a semi-truck were crested a hill about a mile away. "Flag him down," Elias said. "Tell him you were stranded. Car trouble. Don't mention the tunnel. Don't mention me. Just get to the nearest town and call the FBI." "Where are you going?" Elias pointed back toward the desert, toward the jagged red rocks of Blue Canyon. "Home," he said. "Someone has to clean up the mess. And Silas needs to be buried proper. Beside the creek." The truck was getting closer. The rumble of the engine was audible. Elias walked up to Rebecca. He took her hand and pressed something into it. The Zippo lighter. "Keep it," he said. "Luck runs out if you don't share it." "Thank you," Rebecca said, clutching the lighter. "For everything." Elias looked at Emily. He winked. "Stay off the skyline, kid." Then, he turned and walked away. He crossed the ditch, stepped into the brush, and within 10 seconds, he was gone, merged with the shadows, vanished as if he had never existed. The semi-truck roared closer. Rebecca stepped out onto the road, waving her arms frantically. The air brakes hissed. The massive vehicle slowed down, the tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. It came to a halt 20 feet away. The passenger window rolled down. An older man with a trucker hat looked down at them, eyes wide. "Holy smoke, lady," the driver yelled over the idling engine. "You two look like you walked out of a war zone. You okay?" Rebecca looked at Emily. She looked at the desert one last time. She squeezed the lighter in her hand. "Yes," Rebecca said, her voice strong and clear. "We're okay. We're going home." 1 week later. The interrogation room at the FBI field office in San Diego was cold, sterile, and gray. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Rebecca sat at the metal table. She was clean now. Her hair was washed, her cuts bandaged, but her eyes were different. They were older. They were eyes that had seen the devil's throat and climbed back out. Across from her sat Special Agent Miller, no relation. A man with a cheap suit and a tired face. He tapped a pen on his notepad. "Mrs. Miller," the agent said, looking at the file, "we found the wreckage of the helicopter. We identified the bodies. You took down a high-ranking lieutenant of the Sinaloa cartel. It's impressive. I just wanted to save my daughter," Rebecca said flatly. "We also found the burnt remains of a ranch house about 10 miles south." The agent continued, "And the body of a man in a drainage pipe. Identified as Silas Stone, former Navy SEAL. Dishonorable discharge in '98. Did you know him? He gave us water." Rebecca lied smoothly. "He tried to help. Then he died." "And the canyon?" The agent leaned forward. "Our tactical teams found evidence. A sniper nest. Booby traps. A collapsed cave entrance. It looks like a defensive position. Did anyone else help you? Mrs. Miller? Someone capable?" Rebecca thought of the blue eyes. The ghillie suit. The brother who cleaned up the mess. She reached into her pocket and touched the cool metal of the Zippo lighter. "No," Rebecca said, looking the agent dead in the eye. "It was just me. Just a mother protecting her child. Adrenaline does crazy things, agent." The agent stared at her for a long moment. He knew she was lying. She knew he knew, but there was no proof. The ghost was gone. All right, the agent sighed, closing the file. You're free to go, Mrs. Miller. Your ex-husband is waiting in the lobby. Rebecca stood up. She walked to the door. One more thing, the agent said. That lighter. Interesting piece. Where did you get it? Rebecca pulled it out. She flicked the lid. Clink. I found it, she said. In the desert. Just a bit of luck. She walked out of the room. In the lobby, David was waiting. He looked frantic, worried, holding a teddy bear. He rushed over and hugged Emily. Then he looked at Rebecca. Becky, oh my God, are you okay? I was so worried. I heard it was a nightmare. Rebecca looked at him. He looked soft, safe, but distant. He belonged to the world of traffic and taxes. She had walked through the fire. We're fine, David, she said. She took Emily's hand. They walked out of the federal building and into the bright, warm California sun. The city noise was loud, cars, construction, people talking on phones, but underneath it all, Rebecca could still hear the silence of the desert. She could feel the weight of the shotgun. She looked north, toward the border. Somewhere out there, in the red rocks, a man was watching the horizon. And somewhere in the earth, an old soldier was sleeping by a creek. Rebecca Miller squeezed her daughter's hand. She wasn't just an architect anymore. She was a survivor, and she would never be afraid of the dark again.